Chapter 460. Qin Yining frowned when he heard that. What are you talking about? I'm not discussing this with you because I want to go back to the capital. Although the living conditions here are not as good as in the capital, won't you feel more at ease if I'm by your side and you look at me? If I go back to the capital, won't I be giving someone a hostage for no reason? Pang Xiao was at a loss for words when he heard Qin Yining's words. This was what it was like to have an overly intelligent wife. She could always find flaws in his arrangements, but he could not refute her words at all. Pang Xiao said, I'm just worried that you'll suffer with me. You might not have realized it yourself, but you've lost a lot of weight recently. You've already lost blood and vitality, and then you've been suffering from 3 disasters and 8 disasters. Bing Tang has always emphasized that you must take good care of your body, but ever since you've been with me, your current life doesn't allow you to take good care of your body. Not only can't I let you live a happy life, but I also make you live in fear all day long. I married you to let you live a happy life, but I always make you suffer. Qin Yining's heart had already melted into a mess. Pang Xiao was such a decisive and domineering man. He was willing to show his weak side in front of her. This was the greatest trust and respect he had for her. Qin Yining stretched out his arms and hugged Pang Xiao's body. He said, Don't worry. I've been in good health since I was young. I'll be fine. Besides, Bing Tang has been by my side all day long. What else can happen? Right now, it's a matter of life and death. If I leave you to live a happy life alone, I won't be able to feel at ease. No matter what, I was the one who came up with the idea of using Qingtian Alliance and Silver Masked Spy. Now that something has happened, I have to bear the responsibility. Sister Yi, don't say that you came up with that idea because we had the same idea. You did it to help me, and I also thought about it and nodded. Even if you poke a hole in the sky, I should bear the responsibility. I'm a big man, but when something happens, I hide under my wife's skirt. What's wrong with that? Pang Xiao couldn't help but hold Qin Yining's hand. He frowned and said, Do you understand? No matter what you do, I will support you. When I don't tell you to stand out, you're not allowed to do so. Qin Yining's hand hurt a little from being held by his large, bony, and warm hand. However, she couldn't bear to let go of him. You and I are one. What you should bear for me, I should also bear for you. I always thought that there was no distinction between you and me. How is this a question of who is hiding behind who? Just say that the one above wants to kill you one day. Do you think he will let me go? Pooh. 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 Spit it out. Pang Xiao pinched Qin Yining's cheek. You naughty girl. Why did you mention it? What Qin Yining brought up was Pang Xiao's deepest fear. What he was most afraid of was not losing his life, but that he would bring her into the abyss because of his own selfishness. Qin Yining saw that his face had turned red from anxiety and knew that it was because he was distressed. He sighed and snuggled into Pang Xiao's arms. He said, All right, let's not argue about this issue. Anyway, I won't go back to the capital. As for the method I just mentioned, what do you think? Pang Xiao pursed his lips and thought for a moment. After a long time, he said, This method is feasible, but it's also very dangerous. When you go, you must bring enough people with you. Qin Yining smiled and said, Don't worry. Including Aunt Cow, I have 5 silver masked spies. This number is almost comparable to that of the Emperor Emeritus of the Dian dynasty. How dangerous can it be? Pang Xiao was very reluctant. How could he endure Qin Yining risking his life because of him? However, Li Chitian was guarding the perimeter with his men. He didn't give any orders or make any moves. It made it hard for people to know what he was doing. More importantly, there could be people watching him from the shadows. This made Pang Xiao not dare to participate in Qin Yining's plan. Qin Yining's idea was actually very simple. Prince Zhengxian's consort was tired from the journey. In addition, her body wasn't well. The journey was bumpy and frightening, so she should be sick now. Therefore, Prince Zhengxian planned to send people to escort the consort back to the capital for treatment. Therefore, the next day, Qin Yining fell sick. Even the servants in the yamen became busy. After 3 days, when Qin Yining came out to see people, his face was pale and yellow. His eyes were lifeless and his body was emaciated. He looked like he would faint at any moment. Seeing Qin Yining like this, Magistrate Li was moved. He pulled on Pang Xiao's sleeve and said, "It's all because of the natural disaster. The consort has a precious body. In this kind of place, she eats and uses the same things as us. Moreover, she has been living in this kind of oppressive environment for a long time. It's hard for such a delicate person to fall sick." Pang Xiao said with annoyance, "Magistrate Li is right. It's all because of this king. He only cared about the outside matters and neglected her health. She has always been weak. When she came to the disaster area, she went through the wind and rain with me. Now, her previous illness has been brought back. What does Wang Yi plan to do? The environment here is so bad. There aren't any good doctors. This king plans to arrange for his guards to escort her back to Jing for medical treatment. As for your majesty, this king has to write a memorial to explain the situation." Pang Xiao said and couldn't help but sigh. Magistrate Li had been with Pang Xiao day and night these days. He admired this god of war very much. He immediately said, "Wang Yi, don't worry. Although this official's words carry little weight, this official will write a memorial to explain this matter to your majesty. I will not let your majesty misunderstand your difficulties." Pang Xiao looked at Magistrate Li emotionally. His phoenix eyes were filled with gratitude. He smiled and patted his shoulder. "Thank you very much." Magistrate Li smiled and waved his hand. He blushed and said, "Compared to Wang Yi and the consort's righteous act, this official is just doing his duty and reporting the truth to your majesty. How can I accept Wang Yi's thanks? No matter what, this king has to thank you." Pang Xiao said seriously, "In the current court, there are very few officials who are as upright and responsible as Magistrate Li." These words caused Magistrate Li's face to turn red. He waved his hand and ran away after exchanging some pleasantries with Pang Xiao. It was obvious that he was embarrassed to a certain extent. Thus, Pang Xiao and Magistrate Li wrote separate memorials. The next day, they arranged for Qin Yining to leave the yamen under the care of his attendants and servant girls. They walked all the way to the natural cave that Cao Yuqing had said was formed by the earth dragon turning over. Although they took a carriage, the road had been repaired and they didn't waste much time. In the afternoon, they arrived near the crack in the earth. Cao Yuqing was dressed in men's clothing and sat on the shaft of the carriage driving. She raised her eyes to look at Jing Zhe and the others. Jing Zhe and the other 3 silver-masked secret agents understood and went to investigate the situation. Chapter 461. Look here. Cao Yuqing pulled Qin Yining's hand and pointed at the crack in the ground. "I suspect that the entrance is here. I was afraid of alerting the enemy during my investigation, so I didn't go near it. However, I vaguely saw a faint light coming from the cave at night. Although they covered it with leaves, some light still leaked out." Qin Yining nodded. "I believe that your judgment is correct. Shall we go down now?" Cao Yuqing thought for a moment and said, "Since we're already here, let's go in and take a look. I suspect that the treasure is here. However, you have to be vigilant and stay close to me. I'm worried that they'll betray us, although I'm not sure yet." Qin Yining nodded. Logically, she felt that the people from the Qingtian alliance might have betrayed them. However, emotionally, she still didn't want to believe it. Cao Yuqing pulled Qin Yining and walked a few steps. Then, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. "Wait a moment. Let's order someone to secretly investigate first. Since we're already here, there's no rush." Xiao Shui. The dark-skinned Xiao Shui immediately went forward and bowed. "Go down and take a look secretly." "Yes." Xiao Shui was the best at lightness kung fu among them. He was also very good at investigating the terrain. Cao Yuqing protected Qin Yining behind her in a protective stance. Then, she led the remaining 3 secret agents, Bing Tang and Ji Yun, and retreated behind the bushes by the road. Xiao Shui's figure disappeared into the cave. After waiting for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, little Snow came out again. Seeing him push aside the leaves covering the cave entrance and nod at them, Cao Yuqing was relieved and led Qin Yining and the others to the cave entrance. "How is it inside?" Xiao Shui said, "The space inside is very large. Perhaps it was caused by the earth dragon turning over. This crack actually leads to a natural cave. There are some boxes in the cave, but we can hear the sound of running water. There must be other exits, but we haven't had time to investigate yet." Cao Yuqing nodded and looked at Qin Yining questioningly. Qin Yining thought for a moment and said, "Have you seen what's in the box? There are silver ingots inside. 10 taels of silver for a silver ingot." When Qin Yining heard this, he was even more convinced that there was a portion of the treasure hidden here. "Let's go. We have to go in and take a look. Although there's no one else here." Jing Zhe and Xiao Shui went down the cave first, followed by Cao Yuqing who supported Qin Yining. Bing Tang and Ji Yun followed behind Qin Yining. Finally, Young Man and Da Han went down. Da Han walked at the back, using the torch in his hand to illuminate the area. He followed the footsteps of the person in front of him, but when they came to a turn, he could not help but look back in the direction of the cave entrance. Sure enough, after walking through the spacious passageway, they soon arrived at an extremely spacious space. The flickering light of the torches was blown away by the wind from an unknown direction, and a layer of orange-red halo spread over their bodies. A few large boxes with camphor wood edges were piled up not far away. The neatly arranged snowflakes inside reflected the orange light, appearing golden and dazzling. Qin Yining looked at the wooden boxes carefully and felt that they were very familiar. That's right. These boxes are indeed the boxes of the retired emperor's treasure. She and Pang Xiao had been trapped at the location of the treasure for a long time, so she had seen many of these boxes and was very familiar with them. Jing Zhe strode forward, grabbed a silver ingot and looked at it. He said gloomily, "The retired emperor is too." He was, after all, a former spy by the retired emperor's side. No matter how dissatisfied he was, it was not good for him to say it out loud. However, everyone present had suffered in the Dian before, so they all had dissatisfaction in their hearts. The retired emperor did not care about the people of the Dian. He would rather let the people starve to death in order to hide the treasure and try in vain to make a comeback. Such an incapable ruler who did not care about the lives of the people still made people's teeth itch with hatred when they thought about it. They wished they could eat his flesh raw. The few spies looked at the silver ingots in the boxes. Qin Yining frowned deeply. Cao Yuqing sensed that something was wrong with Qin Yining and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Qin Yining also walked to the front of the box, picked up a silver ingot and weighed it in his hand. He said, "I keep feeling that something is wrong. There are so many treasures, why are there only a few boxes here?" Cao Yuqing smiled and said, "Maybe the hidden person separated the treasures into several parts and placed them separately." Qin Yining shook his head. "I don't think so. It's not a normal time now. Even if they wanted to hide it, there's no need to place a part of it in the center of the area. Then what do you think? I think that there are only a few boxes, but they seem to be bait." As Qin Yining spoke, he threw the silver ingots back into the alley. He looked down and found that there were only 2 layers of silver ingots. The bottom layer was a wooden board. He grabbed the wooden board and opened it. The silver ingots fell into the box. There was only the surface layer of silver ingot. Qin Yining's expression changed dramatically. "Not good. There's a trap here. Let's go." Everyone turned pale with fright and hurriedly rushed to the entrance of the cave. Unexpectedly, before they could run far, they saw more than 10 people led by Mrs. Liao come down from the entrance of the cave. Qin Yining's face was as calm as water. He sneered, "I didn't expect Mrs. Liao to be here." Mrs. Liao smiled at Qin Yining and said, "I also didn't expect the Alliance Master to be here." "Oh." Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and said, "I thought Mrs. Liao had already thought of this. When you came to find me that day, didn't you already set up the trap? What you're saying is really disappointing." Mrs. Liao frowned. Shisha held her heart and said, "Alliance Master, are you saying that we are the bad guys?" Qin Yining pointed at the men behind Mrs. Liao who were holding swords, spears, and sticks. He couldn't help but laugh and said, "In this situation, if Mrs. Liao can still say that everyone is loyal to me, the Alliance Master, do you think I would believe it?" Mrs. Liao heard this and couldn't help but look back at the people behind her. She then covered her mouth and laughed. I always knew that the Alliance Master is a smart person. In this situation, I won't keep you in suspense. You just want to take my life. Mrs. Liao heard this and was very surprised. People say that Pan the Wise is a genius. Looking at the Alliance Master now, he really does look like Pan the Wise. This was a silent admission that they would kill Qin Yining. Qin Yining wasn't afraid. She pursed her lips and said, "Tell me first, where are my other 6 subordinates?" Mrs. Liao smiled and said, "I thought that with the Alliance Master's intelligence, you should be able to guess where they are." Hearing that, Qin Yining raised her head and closed her eyes. Although she hadn't seen the 6 spies, if they died because of her orders, how could Qin Yining bear it? Chapter 462. Qin Yining's pupils constricted as he asked in a deep voice, "Those 6 people have no grudges against you. I've always thought that the Qingtian Alliance is an organization that exterminates evil and upholds justice. Everyone in the Qingtian Alliance is a benevolent and chivalrous person. I didn't expect that there would be a time when you would kill people for money. Don't talk as if you're so noble." Mrs. Liao's face turned red and her voice became louder. "You've had everything since you were born. Have you ever experienced the hardships of ordinary people like us? That stupid emperor doesn't care about the lives of the people. He even raised some secret agents to do those heartless and despicable things for him. Those people are just the dogs raised by that stupid emperor. They should have died long ago. What kind of good thing are you? Do you dare to say that you didn't accept the Qingtian Alliance because you wanted our power? Do you dare to say that you're much more noble than that stupid emperor because you took over his secret agents? You're all the claws of that stupid emperor. You're all disgusting. Now you're asking me to kill people for money? You just want to use us to help you get the treasure and enrich your husband's army. Aren't you just killing people for money? Don't think that we're fools. We risked our lives for you, but you got all the benefits. Why?" Mrs. Liao held her sword and walked towards Qin Yining step by step. Cao Yuqing's expression was dignified as she protected Qin Yining behind her. Under the cover of Jing Zhe and the other 3, they retreated. Mrs. Liao wasn't in a hurry to order people to rush over. Instead, she slowly walked to the chest and picked up the silver ingot to weigh it in her hand. "The silver here is all dirty money. It's all because that stupid emperor sacrificed the lives of the people. Alliance Master, didn't you surrender to Daju with your father? Why aren't you loyal to the country? Why did you order people to steal the treasure? Isn't that disloyal? The wealth accumulated by killing so many people, yet you want to take it for yourself. How much more noble are you than me? How noble is it?" Mrs. Liao roared angrily at the end of her sentence. Her voice echoed in the empty cave, causing dirt, stones, and other things to fall down. However, everyone was staring at the person in front of them and had no time to pay attention to it. Qin Yining said, "I took over as the alliance leader because the previous alliance leader passed the position to me. You were not convinced by me, but I never ordered you to do anything. Instead, when you encountered any trouble, you needed my status in the imperial court to help you think of a solution. When necessary, you even wanted me to take the blame. I don't think I've done anything wrong to your Azure Sky Alliance, but you've betrayed the Alliance Master for a sum of money and abandoned your morals. How are your actions different from those of the previous incapable ruler? Do you know that you are no longer worthy of the name Azure Sky Alliance? I advise you to change your names." Mrs. Liao's face turned hot, and the embarrassment in her heart disappeared. What followed was a burst of evil laughter. "You don't have to say such things to poke our heart. Our brothers risked their lives to get the money, not for our own use, but for the people. The incapable ruler of the Yang dynasty was not a good thing, and the incapable ruler of Daju was not a good thing either. When the Earth Dragon turned over and countless people died, the incapable ruler only stared at the money. He didn't even pay attention to the rescue. He delayed for 2 months before sending people to the disaster area empty-handed. Did he send people to count the corpses? This kind of incapable ruler, the treasure can't fall into the hands of such a person. Naturally, Our Azure Sky Alliance will always be worthy of the name Azure Sky. We will save this money and use it to overthrow the incapable ruler of Daju. And you can watch from the underworld with your silver-masked spies. Qin Yining sneered, you're making it sound so dignified. In your words, who is more noble than who? I only know that the Alliance Master looks down on us motley crew. Mrs. Liao sneered, the 6 people you sent were all elites. They were all elites around the incapable ruler. They were loyal, but after taking the knockout drug, weren't they still put down for us to kill? Qin Yining's pupils shrank, and he angrily said, did you really kill them after knocking them out with drugs? The reason why the silver-masked spies trusted the Azure Sky Alliance was all because of her. If this was true, then her sins would be even more serious. Mrs. Liao continued to lead people to Qin Yining with swords and said, I'm not afraid to tell you that those people were indeed trained. Their resistance to drugs was really strong. Out of the 6 of them, we only killed 3 at first, and the other 3 ran away. They kept chasing after our team that was transporting the treasure, like a wolf that had locked onto its prey. If it wasn't for their relentless pursuit, the treasure's route wouldn't have deviated. We didn't know how much information they had leaked to the outside world, so we could only plan to falsely accuse them. At the same time, we wanted to see if they had leaked the location of the treasure. Originally, the worst-case scenario was that they had leaked the location. But we didn't expect that this group of people wasn't smart enough. When the 3 of them were finally caught and killed by us, we discovered that they didn't tell anyone. Alliance Master, Prince Zhongxian's concubine, do you understand everything now? Now, as long as we kill you, no one will know that the treasure fell into our hands, and no one will leak our true identities. We only need to conceal our identities and wait for the right time to make our move. And you, because you were targeted by bandits on your way back to the capital, you were robbed and killed by them. If Wang Yi came to suppress the bandits, he would be doing a good deed for the local people. Tell me, aren't we worried about the country and the people? As soon as she finished speaking, Mrs. Liao suddenly showed her power. She pointed at the dozen people behind her and said, kill them all. Yes. The men roared and rushed forward. Qin Yining and Bing Tang immediately hid at the back, so as not to get in the way and delay the performance of the Silver Mask spies. Cao Yuqing had already been furious when she heard this. She and Jingzhe clenched their teeth and held back their anger. They wanted to take revenge for the 6 people who had died. The Silver Mask spies had no new forces to join them. One dead person was one less person. Their brothers could die heroically, but they couldn't be killed by the villains of the Green Sky Alliance. That would really make them die with regret. For a time, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard in the cave. Obviously, the people from the Qingtian Alliance were also good fighters. More than a dozen of them could actually fight evenly with Cao Yuqing and the other 4 spies. Just as they were trembling, they suddenly heard the sound of trembling footsteps. Soon, men wearing the armor of the Dragon Legion rushed in. The leader let out a loud laugh. Good. What princess is sick and needs to recuperate? The princess actually came for the treasure. If this isn't treason, then what is? Brothers, take them down. Chapter 463. When Qin Yining saw the situation, his pupils constricted. She had expected that she would experience something, but she did not expect that Li Qitian's people would do something like the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. She had said that she was sick to return to the capital, but she was not on her way. Instead, she was blocked by the Dragon Legion Corps in a cave with a treasure chest and was in a standoff with the people from the Green Sky Alliance. Now, how did she get into the cave? She couldn't explain it. She could say that the Green Sky Alliance lured her in, but would Li Qitian believe that? Even if that was the case, Li Qitian would only believe what he wanted to believe. She was in danger here, and Pang Xiao would not have an easy time outside. In the spacious cave, one could only hear the sharp sounds of weapons clashing and the angry roars of men. However, no matter how spacious the cave was, the space was limited. Once there were more people, not only would the entrance be surrounded by the people from the Dragon Legion Corps, but if they shrank the encirclement, the people from the Green Sky Alliance and the Silver Mask spies would not be able to do anything. The people from the Green Sky Alliance and the Silver Masked Spies, who were originally fighting to the death, now had a common enemy. However, the people from the Dragon Legion Corps that Li Chitian had arranged were all elites. Not only were they good at martial arts, but they also had an advantage in terms of formation. They formed teams of 8. Not long after the first team attacked, the second team would take over. When the second team retreated, the third team would also fight without hesitation. With such a tactic, the Dragon Legion Corps was full of energy. However, the Green Sky Alliance and the Silver Masked Spies had already lost a lot of energy. How would they be able to withstand the pressure of such a tactic? Qin Yining looked at the entrance of the cave. There were several Dragon Legion Corps soldiers guarding there. There were also 8 people who had just retreated and were resting while shouting and cheering. If this continued, Li Chitian's group would most likely overwhelm all of them and capture them alive. If she was brought to Li Chitian, not to mention that Pang Xiao and her father would restrict her, as long as Li Chitian wanted to, he would mercilessly accuse Pang Xiao of treasure-seeking and treason. Qin Yining held Bing Tang's hand tightly. Ji Yun and Cao Yuqing used all their martial arts to protect her, trying their best to protect her. Very quickly, half of the Green Sky Alliance members were killed by the Dragon Legion Corps. Even the Silver Masked Spy was injured in the chaotic battle. Qin Yining and Bing Tang squatted down and hugged each other. They curled up in the corner between the box and the cave wall. Bing Tang. Qin Yining held Bing Tang's hand and said anxiously, "We can't go on like this. We might all die here. Wang Fei, I am not afraid." The smell of blood and the sharp battle cries made Bing Tang tremble uncontrollably. She could barely control her tongue. However, she still used her petite body to block Qin Yining, forming the last line of defense for her. Qin Yining's eyes were hot. In the darkness, she didn't miss Bing Tang's uncontrollable tears. "Silly girl." Qin Yining sniffed and said in a low voice, "Later, when they are fighting, you should hide in the crack behind the box." "I don't. Let me finish. The Green Sky Alliance members might not notice your existence. You don't know martial arts and don't have any killing power. Plus, when the Dragon Legion Corps came in, the Green Sky Alliance and the spy were fighting. They won't notice you either. I am the princess consort. No matter how I hide, it is useless. They may not hurt me. At most, they will capture me to threaten His Highness. Or capture me and convict me. No matter what, you will not have a good ending by my side. Ji Yun has already fought and attracted their attention. She can't hide, but you can. We came out together. We can't all die here. Bing Tang, hide. When the battle is over, don't wait for them to come and lift the box. Hide in the corner where there is water. Maybe you can find another exit." Bing Tang's face was covered in tears. She shook her head and said, "I can't leave you behind. Ever since you took me away from King Ning, I have been your servant. You treat me like a younger sister. I treat you as my master, but you are also my sister. I don't have a family anymore. I don't want to be without you." Qin Yining's heart ached. She gritted her teeth and took a deep breath to stop herself from crying. "Bing Tang, I can't escape. So many eyes are watching me. Anyone can escape, but I can't. If possible, I want everyone to escape. I don't want to lose my life for nothing. But I can't. So now is the time to stop our losses. Anyone who can escape counts. If we escape, we can at least send a message to Wang Yi and tell him to prepare in time. He is focused on disaster relief and has taken out all his assets. But someone is worried about her and sent someone to monitor her. They even came to intercept me. He doesn't know that something happened to me here. How can he guard against it?" Bing Tang sobbed. Amidst the deafening battle cries, she saw the Dragon Legion's soldiers slash Cao Yuqing's arm. She cried out in shock, and her tears flowed even more fiercely. Even Cao Yuqing was starting to get injured. What about other places that she couldn't see? The enemy was strong and she was weak. Qin Yining's target was too obvious. If she still couldn't help send a message, wouldn't Pang Xiao be ambushed without knowing? "Okay. I will definitely pass the message to Wang Yi." Qin Yining rubbed Bing Tang's head and said softly, "The most important thing is that you have to survive. Don't lose your life for nothing. Okay. Bing Tang wiped her tears and snot and nodded while sobbing. The battle between the two sides had already reached a white-hot state. Because half of the Green Sky Alliance's people were gone, the pressure on the Silver Mask Spy and the others suddenly increased. The encirclement instantly shrank. Ji Yun and Cao Yuqing, who were in front of Qin Yining, also started to get injured. Suddenly, someone knocked over the oil lamp that the Green Sky Alliance brought in. The only light in the cave was extinguished. The weak light at the entrance of the cave wasn't enough for everyone to immediately adapt to the darkness. When everyone's eyes were covered in darkness, Qin Yining immediately pushed Bing Tang and signaled for her to hide. Bing Tang had already figured out the route. She immediately climbed over the box and hid in the gap between the alley and the mountain wall. In the darkness, the chaotic battle only stopped for a moment before it continued. Qin Yining tried her best to hide in the corner, but her shoulder was still cut by someone's knife. Under the burning pain, she cried out in pain and fell to the ground. Cao Yuqing's hearing was very good. She immediately discovered Qin Yining's situation, but she didn't dare to ask. She was afraid that Qin Yining's direction would be exposed if he answered, so she could only increase the intensity of her attacks. At this time, the Dragon Stallion army soldiers guarding the entrance of the cave had already lit up a match and one of the lanterns that they had prepared. The cave entrance was brightly lit, allowing the people in the chaotic battle to see each other. Chapter 464. The people of the Qingtian Alliance were much more miserable. They had never received special training, so naturally, they didn't know what an indestructible will was. They were originally gathered for benefits, but now that they were besieged, they naturally wanted to retreat. At such a critical moment, since they wanted to retreat, they lost their fighting spirit. In addition, the three sides were in a frenzy. As a result, more than half of the people of the Qingtian Alliance were dead or injured. Only Mrs. Liao and two of her cronies could barely hold on. Under the light, Qin Yining's blood-stained back was also seen by the people closest to him. The leader of the Dragon Legion shouted, "Everyone, be careful. Your Majesty's order is to capture Prince Zhongxian's concubine alive. Don't kill her, or we won't be able to explain ourselves." "Yes," all the men answered. Jing Zhe and the others were already in a frenzy. Seeing that Qin Yining was injured, they were even more desperate. They wanted to fight for her life. These people were originally living on the edge of a knife. In the beginning, they accidentally injured the son of an official. If Qin Yining didn't come up with a plan to use Li Qiqian's suspicion of the whereabouts of the treasure to give the silver-masked spies a secret hidden by hypnosis, forcing Li Qiqian to keep all the silver-masked spies alive. Not to mention Jing Zhe, the rest of them might have been captured and tortured countless times. Although they were master and servant to Qin Yining, Qin Yining protected all of them, and he saved Jing Zhe's life. Now they were outnumbered, and the enemy was strong while they were weak. Their carelessness caused Qin Yining to be injured, but they couldn't watch Qin Yining lose his life. They'd rather die. Just as Jing Zhe thought, Cao Yuqing, Xiao Shui, young man, and Die Han all burst out with a strong fighting spirit. They gritted their teeth and fought hard. Especially Cao Yuqing. She loved Qin Huayuan deeply. She believed that Qin Huayuan wasn't a wooden stone. He couldn't not feel it at all. He had arranged for her to be Qin Yining's personal bodyguard because he believed that she would do her best to protect his only daughter. If something happened to Qin Yining right under her nose, Cao Yuqing felt that she could atone for her crime with her death. She would never have the face to see Qin Huayuan again. She could die and never see Qin Huayuan again, but she couldn't bear to see that man sad. Qin Huayuan didn't have many children. He only had this one daughter, and she had only returned to his side after many hardships. Cao Yuqing knew how much Qin Huayuan valued Qin Yining and how much he loved his daughter. Not to mention Qin Huayuan, even Cao Yuqing would be reluctant to do so. Her daughter had only been home for a few days before she encountered all kinds of unforeseen events. If she really lost this child, Cao Yuqing couldn't imagine how sad that person would be. Her life was already worthless. How could she be willing to drag out an ignoble existence and watch Qin Yining suffer? Cao Yuqing fought with all her might and finally reached Qin Yining's side. She grabbed her arm and protected her behind her back. "Don't be afraid. Aunt Cao will protect you." Qin Yining was in so much pain that her vision turned black. The blood loss made her lips pale and her entire body cold. However, she still gritted her teeth and persevered. She nodded and said, "Don't worry. I'm not afraid. They won't kill me. If you can leave, then leave quickly." "What nonsense are you saying? If we throw you to them, what will we do?" "Princess, we swear to protect you with our lives." Jingzhe and the others also shouted. When the dragon stallion army saw this, they couldn't help but laugh. They said mockingly, "You can only show off now. Hurry up and put on an act. If you want to say something, then say it quickly. Let's see if you can still be so arrogant when you become a ghost under my blade." His provocative words made the Dragon Legion core troops resting at the entrance of the cave laugh out loud. The laughter of so many men in the limited space of the cave made one's eardrums buzz. Their hearts trembled, and it also created a huge pressure and fear. The Dragon Stallion army was trained by Ji Zhayu. With Ji Zhayu's and Pang Xiao's talents, one could imagine that the Dragon Stallion army's combat ability wasn't inferior to the Tiger armies. Not only in terms of individual combat ability and skills, but also in terms of psychological attacks, these men were also very proficient in them. Even though Qin Yining wasn't afraid of death and was indifferent to everything, she still couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart when faced with the opponent's absolute strength and psychological attack. Perhaps, she really couldn't get out. Qin Yining sighed softly. However, she was no longer afraid. Life and death were fated. There was no use being afraid. It was better to keep a clear head and assess the situation. At least, there was a chance of survival. Otherwise, wouldn't she be stretching her neck out to be killed? At this moment, there was a sudden change. A few groans came from the entrance of the cave. The two groups of Dragon Stallion army soldiers at the front turned around to look. They saw a group of people in grey holding sharp blades, killing the Dragon Stallion army soldiers at the entrance of the cave. Then, they charged toward the Dragon Stallion army. Qin Yining was delighted when he saw this. The cold temperature of his body seemed to be returning to normal. Could it be Pang Xiao? The pressure on Ji Yun, Cao Yuqing, Jingzhe, and the others lessened, and they slowly retreated to Qin Yining's side. When the people in grey suddenly charged over and caught the Dragon Stallion army off guard, they saw a familiar thin figure carrying a lantern. Under the protection of the people in grey, he rushed toward Qin Yining. "Second Master Lu?" The person who came was the one who was tricked by her fake map. It was rumored that when the Earth Dragon turned over, he was buried and went missing. "Lu Heng, are you okay?" Lu Heng quickly walked over and asked worriedly, "Are you injured?" Qin Yining's body was a little shaky. He supported himself with the help of Ji Yun and Cao Yuqing, who were injured. He shook his head and said, "I'm fine." "Why are you here?" "It's a long story. I just found out that you were trapped here, so I immediately brought people here. Your Majesty's people are outside the cave, but I have already subdued them. Quickly follow me out. If you have anything to say, let's talk on the surface." Qin Yining nodded tiredly. "Okay. Call Bing Tang. Let's." Before he finished speaking, Qin Yining suddenly heard a series of rumbling sounds, mixed with the crisp sound of rocks falling to the ground. The ground under their feet was shaking. All the fighting stopped abruptly. Everyone looked at each other and looked around in fear. After a short moment of silence, an even louder rumbling sound like muffled thunder and the shaking of the earth suddenly made everyone in the cave stagger. "Oh no! The Earth Dragon is turning over. Run! Run!" Waves of angry roars rang in her ears. Qin Yining didn't know who was grabbing her arm and running wildly. She also didn't know who was supporting her when she was about to fall. The wound on her back was burning with pain. It was her sticky, moist, and warm blood. Qin Yining was already in a daze due to the loss of blood. Now that the earth was shaking violently, she couldn't hold on any longer. Everyone's terrified screams and the sound of the earth breaking when the Earth Dragon turned over seemed to be getting farther and farther away. All that was left was a sharp ringing in her ears and her gradually fading consciousness. In the last moments of Qin Yining's consciousness, she saw Cao Yuqing tightly holding her hand. "Aunt Cao, go. Go quickly. Don't worry about me." Chapter 465. The rain poured down, and the forest in the mountains was pitch black. The dirt road at the foot of the mountain was already muddy due to the earth dragon's movement. Huge dark clouds hung overhead, as if pressing down on people's hearts, making the already anxious people even more panicked. Pang Xiao rode a fast horse, leading Huzi, 4 Jinghu Wei, and 20 dragon stallion army soldiers toward the location of the incident. Huzi said anxiously, "Wang Yi, slow down. Wang Fei will be fine." Pang Xiao's jaw tightened, his lips pursed into a line, and his knuckles clenched tightly. Is the informant accurate? Is it true that Wang Fei was kidnapped into the cave and encountered the earth dragon's movement? Huzi swallowed, gritted his teeth, and said, "That's what I heard." Pang Xiao punched out fiercely. He really wanted to kill himself. He should not have let Qin Yining take the risk to come out. What treasure! How could it be more important than Qin Yining's life? Not to mention the silver, even if he used the entire country to exchange for it, he would not exchange it. If Qin Yining lost his life because of these worldly possessions, Pang Xiao would really want to die to atone for his sins. The group of people galloped and quickly arrived at the location of the informant's report. There was a lot of water on the road that had been soaked by the rain. It was impossible to find the previous footprints. At this time, outside the cave, there was a group of soldiers wearing the silver battle robes of the Dragon Stallion army digging with shovels. Under a large yellow umbrella, Li Qitian, dressed in dark blue, stood with his hands behind his back. Great eunuch Li Guanwen held an oil paper umbrella and stood upwind, shielding Li Qitian from the wind and rain. The sound of Pang Xiao's horse hooves attracted Li Qitian's attention. Everyone looked up. Seeing that it was Pang Xiao's group, Li Qitian could not help but frown. When he met Pang Xiao's gaze, his pupils constricted, and he could not help but feel nervous and afraid. He was the emperor, so why should he be afraid? Li Qitian straightened his back again. Pang Xiao's team had already arrived. The dark cloud stopped and let out a hiss. Pang Xiao dismounted from the horse. A string of water droplets fell from the corner of his robe that was soaked by the heavy rain. "Your Majesty." Pang Xiao ignored the mud and led everyone to kneel and salute. Li Qitian supported Pang Xiao with both hands and said in a sorrowful voice, "As soon as I arrived, I received a report that the Qin clan had brought people to the capital and found a cave. When they went in to investigate, they just happened to see the earth dragon turn over." These words, was Princess Consort a gopher? He even dived into the hole to check it out. His Majesty didn't even care about his face anymore. Pang Xiao's expression did not change, but Huzi, Jinghu Wei, and the others behind him almost wanted to punch him. Pang Xiao said in a low voice, "After the earth dragon turned over, the relief supplies did not arrive. In this desperate situation, many mountain bandits and road robbers were born. The Qin clan only arranged for 4 guards and 2 servant girls on their way back to the capital. If they encountered these people and were kidnapped, the consequences would be unimaginable." Pang Xiao's power seemed to solidify, and could transform into an invisible hand that could grab people by the throat. Li Qitian was the emperor, so he should not be afraid. But under Pang Xiao's serious gaze, he could not help but straighten his back even more. He felt a bit guilty, but a voice in his heart kept shouting, "All the land under heaven belongs to the emperor, all the people on the land are the emperor's subjects. This world belongs to me, all the wealth belongs to me, and the lives of my subjects belong to me." Wasn't there a good saying, if the emperor wants his subjects to die, they have no choice but to die? Qin Yining was just a woman. If he wanted Pang Xiao to die, Pang Xiao did not dare to not die. Qin Yining was just an accessory of Pang Xiao, so it did not matter. Pang Xiao did not have much affection for Qin Yining. When Qin Yining's family first came to Daeju, didn't they still want to kill him and kidnap him to torture him to death? Now that he was dead, he could get a new one. Pang Xiao could be considered to have profited from a disaster. Thinking of this, Li Qitian became more calm and confident, and less guilty and embarrassed. Moreover, He wanted to ask Pang Xiao why Qin Yining suddenly returned to the capital. Was he really sick or was he faking it? Was he secretly plotting to steal the treasure? Was that why he happened to be buried in the hole? Li Qitian's mind was filled with thoughts, but it only took a few breaths of time. At this time, Pang Xiao had already brought Huzi and 4 Jinghu Wei soldiers to find a shovel and start digging. Seeing Pang Xiao like this, the 20 Dragon Stallion army soldiers also looked for tools to help. Li Qitian raised his voice and said, "Pang Xiao, come over. Let them do this rough work." Pang Xiao ignored him and did not stop what he was doing. Li Guanwen saw that Pang Xiao was ignoring Your Majesty's words and hurriedly went forward with an umbrella. He raised the umbrella high to block the rain for Pang Xiao and said, "Wang Yi, Your Majesty might have something to ask you. Do you want to rest for a while? Let the others do this rough work." Pang Xiao stepped on the shovel and dug it into the ground. He did not even raise his head and said, "I'll have to trouble Gong Gong to thank Your Majesty on behalf of this king." However, saving people is like putting out a fire. The more people there are, the more strength there is. If you have anything to say, wait until this king has rescued everyone. Li Guanwen was tactfully rebuffed. He looked at Pang Xiao's side profile with a complicated expression. He turned his attention back to Li Qitian. Although Li Qitian did not hear what Pang Xiao said, it was true that Pang Xiao was not willing to listen to his orders and come to his side. Li Qitian's face darkened. Just as he was about to reprimand Pang Xiao, Li Guanwen said, "Your Majesty, the roads are muddy and the weather is wet and cold. Although your body is healthy, you can't withstand such torment. Why don't you get on the carriage and rest first and have a cup of hot tea to warm your body?" A cold wind blew. Li Qitian was so cold that he shivered. The back of his hand was also icy cold. "All right." Li Qitian's face darkened. He returned to the carriage first. Pang Xiao saw Li Qitian leave from the corner of his eyes. He clenched his teeth and did not relax in the slightest. Sister Yi, where are you? Are you buried here?" If they were really buried in the ground, then wouldn't that mean? No, she can't be dead. She is still so young. How can she be dead? He was digging so hard just to prove that she was not here. "Wang Yi." At this moment, Huzi shouted in panic. Pang Xiao's heart trembled. He hurriedly threw down the shovel to look. He saw that under the feet of the Dragon Stallion army that had started digging, a severed arm had been dug out. It was a pale white arm dripping with blood. It was a man's arm. It was not Qin Yining's arm. However, this did not make Pang Xiao relax. After confirming that there was someone below, Pang Xiao led everyone to dig like crazy. They used shovels and even their hands. The rain stopped. The rain and sweat on their bodies mixed with dirt and mud made them very uncomfortable. Pang Xiao was bare-chested like the other men. As the corpses were neatly stacked to the side, Pang Xiao's expression became more and more ugly. He became more and more desperate. Li Qitian also became more and more angry. "These are the Dragon Stallion army that I arranged to find the treasure. How can they all die here?" Chapter 466. Li Qitian never expected that Pang Xiao would dare to shout at him like this in public. He was the emperor, and the world was his. Pang Xiao was just an official, but he dared to speak like this in front of him. Did he want to rebel? Li Qitian only felt that his face was damaged. He immediately pointed at Pang Xiao and scolded angrily, "Do you know who you are talking to? Do you know who you are accusing? Do you think I would send someone to kidnap your wife?" Pang Xiao restrained himself and did not directly kill the person in front of him to vent his anger. "Your Majesty." Pang Xiao cupped his hands in greeting. His muscles, which were drenched by rain and mud, moved smoothly. His wheat-colored skin was covered with scars of various sizes. These were the scars left by many years of war. They were enough to make the people present admire him. His voice was not as sharp as Li Qitian's. Instead, it was flat and straightforward. "My humble wife accompanied me in the disaster area and suffered from hunger all day in such a harsh environment. She also had to worry about the suffering of the people. Although she was a woman, she had a benevolent heart that cared about the people. She wanted to do something for the people, so she never complained in front of me. When she saw that the people in the disaster area had no food or medicine, she took the initiative to sell her dowry in exchange for money to buy food for the people. She also transported the grain from the fields under her name to the porridge store without collecting any money. It can be said that because of her help, I reduced a lot of the pressure on the rice relief. It also allowed many people to escape the fate of starvation. This is not me boasting about her contributions. Magistrate Gong, County Magistrate Lee, and the people of the old capital and the young county all know what she did. She was sick, but she couldn't let go of the disaster area and refused to leave. It was me who forced her to return to the capital to recuperate. Her body was weak, unlike me, who was a rough man. My skin was thick and could withstand beatings. She was a delicate woman. How could she withstand the starvation and lack of medicine in the disaster area? But I was wrong. He was really wrong. If I knew that she would be kidnapped by the Dragon Legion and be buried here, I would rather let her be sick by my side than lose her life. This subject fought for your majesty and became your majesty's sharp blade. Many outsiders said that this subject was a good man. But this valiant subject couldn't even protect his wife. Pang Xiao hung his head. It was unknown whether it was rainwater or tears, but they fell from his messy hair, slid down his resolute and handsome face, and dripped from his chin to his muscular chest. His words evoked the compassion of everyone present. A tough man with outstanding military achievements was unable to protect his new wife. The people buried in this cave were obviously the Dragon Stallion army that Li Chitian had arranged to find the treasure. If you said that the Prince Zhongxian's wife's situation had nothing to do with your majesty, who would believe that? When Li Chitian heard this, he was so angry that his lips quivered. For a long time, he didn't know what to say. Who was Pang Xiao trying to impress with his affectionate and unrepentant appearance? If he really cared about the life and death of the Qin clan, why would he have forcefully seized the Qin clan and made things difficult for them? Li Chitian suspected that Pang Xiao was involved in the loss of the treasure and purposely sent Qin Yining to die to gain sympathy from others to cover up his dirty actions. You don't have to be so sad. Li Chitian said in a low voice, I won't hold you accountable now. Let's focus on digging first. We haven't dug it out yet, but when we get here, it will be clear. It won't be too late to discuss this matter then. Your Majesty's words mean that this subject arranged for a woman to steal the treasure. Li Chitian's face darkened. Indeed, no man would give such an important matter to a woman to do. Li Chitian knew that Qin Yining was extremely smart and was different from normal women. However, no one present knew this. He pretended to be lenient, but his words made him seem too harsh. In front of so many people from the Dragon Legion, he couldn't help but reveal his lowly side. Forget it. I pity that you lost the princess and feel depressed, so I won't blame you for your inappropriate words. However, you have to be careful. Li Chitian put one hand behind his back and pointed at Pang Xiao with the other. Pang Xiao wasn't in the mood to argue with Li Chitian. Logically, he shouldn't argue with Li Chitian in front of others. He cupped his hands and bowed, then turned back to continue digging. Under the collapse of the cave, the soft soil was dug up bit by bit. The corpses of the Dragon Legion and Qingtian Alliance were slowly revealed. Finally, a few chests were revealed. One could vaguely see silver placed on top of them. Li Chitian's eyes lit up. He hurriedly ordered people to move the silver out and count it. Pang Xiao found a hole in the wall not far behind the chests. He could vaguely hear the sound of water dripping from inside. Pang Xiao hurriedly leaned over to take a look. He turned back and ordered Huzi, quickly bring a lantern. Huzi hurriedly raised his head and shouted at the people on the ground for a lantern. He then took the lantern and passed it to Pang Xiao, who was squatting in the hole. Pang Xiao once again put the lantern into the hole. Is anyone there? Sister Yi? In the hole, a faint rustling sound could be heard, followed by a weak female voice. Wang Yi? Is that Wang Yi? Pang Xiao was overjoyed. He hurriedly said, It's me. Are you Bing Tang? Where's the princess? Come out quickly. Who else is inside? Bing Tang's breathing was weak. My leg is broken. I can't come out. Ji Yoon is also here. She's injured. Pang Xiao was very anxious. He couldn't say anything more. He first rescued Bing Tang and Ji Yoon with Huzi. Ji Yoon's body was covered with knife wounds. She had lost too much blood and was unconscious. One of Bing Tang's legs was probably fractured. She was in so much pain that her face turned pale. Li Chitian also heard that there were survivors. He came forward with his hands behind his back to take a look. Pang Xiao grabbed Bing Tang's arm and asked, "Where's the princess? Where's the princess?" Bing Tang's tears flowed down. I don't know. At that time, there were people trying to kill us. The princess hid me behind a box and told me to think of a way to escape. I kept hiding. I saw the princess being slashed by a person wearing a Dragon Legion uniform. There was a big wound on her shoulder and a lot of blood flowed out. At that time, there was a scuffle in the cave. At this point, Bing Tang looked at Li Chitian and changed the topic. We were walking well with the princess. However, we encountered robbers. Those people even dressed up as Dragon Legion soldiers and kidnapped the princess. The princess's guards resisted with their lives. However, they were outnumbered. I don't know if the princess is dead or alive. After hearing Bing Tang say that Qin Yining was injured and bled a lot, Pang Xiao panicked. He was not in the mood to think about which part of Bing Tang's story was true and which part was false, because there was only one thought in his mind, which was whether Qin Yining was alive or dead. She asked Bing Tang to hide, but she didn't. Bing Tang and Ji Yoon were usually inseparable from Qin Yining. The two of them hid in those small holes. Why didn't I see Qin Yining? Was Qin Yining killed or buried here? Thinking of this, Pang Xiao didn't have any other thoughts. He anxiously jumped down and continued to dig. Chapter 467. At this time, the people digging had worked in the rain for an entire afternoon. Everyone was tired, cold, and hungry. But Pang Xiao was not willing to stop. He pursed his lips and carefully cleaned the mud and water. He carefully used the dim candlelight to search for clues. He did not want to let go of even a single thread. Seeing him suddenly search so carefully, the Jinghu Wei also squatted beside him. "Wang Yi, are we not looking for her?" Pang Xiao said in a dry voice. "I am confirming if there are any accessories of Sister Yi here. You all look carefully. Not only do we need to find her, we cannot let go of any clues." "Yes." The four Jinghu Wei received the order and carefully searched in the mud. They really were not willing to let go of any details. The originally tired Dragon Stallion army heard the conversation between Pang Xiao and Li Chitian. Seeing Pang Xiao's affectionate and unregretful appearance, they did not feel tired or cold and spontaneously helped. Li Chitian was currently looking at the several large chests that had just been brought up. In the end, he discovered that most of the chests were empty. There was only a layer of silver ingots on top of the chests. His entire body was deflated. There was no treasure in this cave. He was willing to give up the lives of so many Jinghu Wei in order to find the treasure. Now, he was empty-handed. Not only did he expose his intentions, he might be hated by Pang Xiao. Li Chitian looked at Pang Xiao, who was seriously searching in the cave. Seeing him look so crazy, he could not help but grit his teeth and feel nervous. They had fought together. Others did not understand Pang Xiao's personality, but he understood. This time, he had lost his Wang Fei. Pang Xiao might not love Qin Yining very deeply, but it had hurt his dignity and involved his reputation. He would not let this matter go easily. It would be great if Qin Yining could be found. He could also capture him and interrogate him. Then, he would be in the right. However, if Qin Yining really died like this, not only would there be no evidence, but with these large chests in front of them, he would be suspected of killing his wife for the sake of the treasure. Qin Yining's father was Qin Huayuan, whom he had always wanted to put in an important position. Her husband was also a military general who could intimidate a region. If these two men had a disagreement with him, the consequences would be too horrible to contemplate. Thinking to this point, Li Chitian felt endless regret. If he had known this would happen, he would have investigated thoroughly before making his move. Now that the cave had collapsed, the dead could not bear witness. Even if he had a reason, he would have no one to speak his mind. On the contrary, he would only invite criticism. However, when he picked up the silver ingot and examined it carefully, Li Chitian discovered that the silver ingot was indeed made in Dian, so he felt a little better. In this way, it was even more proof that the silver came from that batch of treasures. It seemed that the real treasure might be nearby. Li Chitian did not hesitate anymore. With a wave of his hand, he instructed the Dragon Stallion army not to gather here and to also start investigating nearby. 2 hours later, the entire cave appeared in front of everyone's eyes while everyone was busy but not panicking. There was no treasure, only corpses wearing the uniform of the Dragon Stallion army and commoner clothing. After doing a count, Li Chitian discovered that the Dragon Stallion army he had sent out had been completely wiped out. Without the whereabouts of the silver and having lost so many people, Li Chitian felt both dejected and angry. He patted the fake chests beside him. Such a small amount of silver was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood when compared to the state treasury and internal funds that were currently in deficit. He had heard that Pang Xiao had taken out 50,000 taels of silver for disaster relief. A person like Wang Yi could take out this amount of silver, but as the emperor, he had not sent any rice or silver for disaster relief. How would others view him? Pang Xiao cleaned up the entire cave and did not find Qin Yining's corpse, so he relaxed a little. At least this proved that Qin Yining might not be dead. Pang Xiao immediately ordered Jinghu Wei and Huzi, "Send people to surround this area. Don't let go of any clues. We must find the princess's whereabouts." Yes. Huzi and Jinghu Wei acknowledged and went to carry out their tasks. Li Chitian saw Pang Xiao's shirtless and muddy appearance and could not help but say, "Come up and rest for a while. Have a cup of hot tea to warm up your body. We still haven't found the Qin clan, right? Maybe she's still alive. Maybe she's tied up by something important. If you want to find her, you have to make sure that she's fine." Without waiting for Pang Xiao to reply, Li Chitian already had a guess in his heart. Qin Yining might have gone to find the treasure. It seemed that Pang Xiao's place had to be closely guarded. Pang Xiao was not in the mood to rest at all. He politely rejected Li Chitian's arrangement and continued to lead people to search around the cave. He even went to the cave where Bing Tang and Ji Yun were hiding to investigate. In the end, there was no sign of Qin Yining's whereabouts. Pang Xiao expanded the search area and used the borrowed Dragon Legion to cooperate with Jinghu Wei to expand the search area. They searched inch by inch and did not let go of any grass or tree, hoping to find some clues. After a day, Pang Xiao found the heavily injured Jingzhe, Xiao Shui, young man, and Da Han. They were all unconscious and had been placed in a cave. Their injuries had been treated simply. It was obvious that someone had placed them here. Pang Xiao's heart pounded. He really wanted to know the situation at that time. However, Bing Tang and Ji Yun had not woken up yet. The 4 spies were also unconscious. At this time, the relief funds from the disaster area finally arrived. Although it was not much, many of the disaster victims had already died. Li Chitian could still afford to feed the remaining people. Therefore, Pang Xiao completely put aside the disaster area matters and focused on finding Qin Yining's whereabouts. However, after hearing Bing Tang and Ji Yun describe the situation in the cave in detail, Pang Xiao still felt his heart turn cold. Fear engulfed his entire body. She was cut by a knife. Yes. In order to protect this servant, the princess consort hid this servant behind the box. She said that she could not escape and asked me to survive. She wanted me to find Wang Yi and warn Wang Yi to be on guard. Pang Xiao closed his eyes. The pain in his heart was like a knife twisting. Ji Yun weakly described the situation at that time in detail. In the end, she said, "I don't know who was more brave and fierce than the men of sacrifice brought by Second Master Lu. At that time, we were all injured. The cave collapsed too badly. It was pitch black and we could not see anything clearly. We wanted to rush over, but the roof collapsed and blocked the way. At that time, Bing Tang called me and pulled me to hide behind the box. Later, after the cave collapsed, We had no choice but to crawl into the cave at the side. Although there was ventilation and water there, we really could not get out. Fortunately, Wang Yi rushed over and saved this servant. At this point, Ji Yun's tears fell like rain. This servant is useless. I did not protect the princess consort well. This servant is really ashamed to face Wang Yi. Ji Yun knelt on the ground in shame and kowtowed repeatedly. Chapter 468. Pang Xiao shook his head and motioned for Ji Yun and Bing Tang to stand up. He analyzed, Sister Yi should not have been buried. Now, we can confirm that she was kidnapped along with Qingtian Alliance's people and Lu Heng's people. The 4 spies who followed you are still seriously injured and unconscious. Only bodyguard Cao is missing. With her personality, she will definitely do everything she can to chase after them. Yes. Bodyguard Cao has always been protecting Princess Consort and never retreated. At that time, this servant and bodyguard Cao shielded Princess Consort behind us. This servant's martial arts skills are not as good as bodyguard Cao's. Bodyguard Cao fought bravely and fiercely. Her injuries should be more serious than this servant's, Ji Yun said confidently. Pang Xiao nodded. That means that the 4 unconscious people were most likely saved by bodyguard Cao. And now, she might be chasing after the kidnappers with her injuries. Ji Yun and Bing Tang's eyes lit up when they heard this. This means that Princess Consort should be fine. Pang Xiao sighed softly and said, at least when the ground dragon turned over, her life should not be in danger. I just don't know what happened after she left. At this point, Pang Xiao frowned worriedly again. She is injured after all. She was just sick a while ago. Now, she is injured and lost blood again. I don't know if she... Pang Xiao felt that he could not continue speaking. Because he could not imagine the scene of Qin Yining being kidnapped while covered in blood. As long as he thought of Qin Yining suffering like that, he hated that he could not immediately kill all the people who caused her to be in this state, including himself. Not only did Pang Xiao doubt himself, he even started to regret it. At that time, if he had not pestered Qin Yining would still be able to live a prosperous life after marrying a peddler. With her ability, it would not be difficult for her to run a business. Perhaps he would have lived a peaceful and stable life a long time ago. Why would he have to face so many disasters? At that time, he always thought that since he had an idea, he should not waste his life. Who would have thought that she would be embroiled in the turmoil of the imperial court and suffer so much? Ji Yun and Bing Tang saw Pang Xiao's entanglement and self-blame, but other than saying a word of comfort, they could not find any other way to ease it, because in their hearts, they were actually as guilty and distressed as Pang Xiao. Unfortunately, their abilities were limited and they couldn't save Qin Yining's life. If the Qin Yining really couldn't get away with it this time, they had no choice but to follow him. While Li Qitian was in charge of the disaster relief, he continued to arrange for people to search for the whereabouts of the treasure in Yang County. However, after searching for so long, he still found nothing. So much gold and silver seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Li Qitian could not stay in Yang County forever. He was also afraid that someone would take the opportunity to cause trouble when he was not in the capital. Therefore, after instructing people to continue searching here, Li Qitian decided to return to the capital. Before leaving, Li Qitian instructed Pang Xiao, go back with Zhen. After being out for so long, there must be a lot of court affairs to deal with in the capital. You won't be able to help much even if you stay here. Court affairs are more important. Zhen has already instructed people to search for the whereabouts of the Qin clan here. You don't have to be anxious. Pang Xiao only sneered when he heard this. Your Majesty can go back. Your subordinates can't even find a dead object like the treasure that doesn't move. How can this official dare to expect them to find a living person? I can find my own wife. As for the affairs of the court, His Majesty is so talented and has so many capable officials to help him. It's really not a big deal to have one less official. Li Qitian's face flushed with anger when he heard Pang Xiao's words. He rebuked in a deep voice, Pang Zhishi, who do you think you are talking to? You are speaking so disrespectfully to Zhen. This is simply treason. This official is not worthy of your Majesty's praise. Pang Xiao's smile was mocking, and his words were filled with hostility. If this official had the slightest bit of treason, this official would not have fallen to this state. I don't even have the manpower to find a wife. If it was in the past when he was leading the Tiger Army, not to mention searching for a person, even an ant hole could be searched like a carpet. However, he did not have enough manpower now. His military power had been taken away. Even if he ignored Li Qiqian's opposition and surveillance and mobilized 100 people from Jinghu Wei, he only had 100 people. Li Qiqian's eyes narrowed dangerously. You have resentment in your heart. In reality, you are blaming Zhen. Pang Xiao's voice rose a bit. This official does not have the energy or the mind to blame anyone. This official only wants to find Sister Yi. If you can find her, then it's fine. I believe that Your Majesty also has questions to ask him. If you can't find her, this official really does not know what he will do. What did she do wrong? She returned to the capital to recuperate, but halfway through, she was kidnapped. The ones who were dug out were the Dragon Stallion army arranged by Your Majesty. Don't let your imagination run wild. Li Qiqian felt a bit guilty. This official is not making wild guesses. This official only sees the facts in front of my eyes. This official has worked hard for Your Majesty, but Your Majesty let this official's wife die. You, Pang Zhishi, how dare you? Do you think that Zhen does not dare to kill you? Your Majesty is wealthy. What is there to be afraid of? Pang Xiao scowled. His usual calmness and wisdom had long been replaced by brutality. Something happened to Qin Yining. It was as if his soul had been taken away by someone. He felt that he was no longer a complete person. Unless he could find her, he really did not know what crazy things he would do. He did not even want to protect his country anymore. He wanted to destroy this empire. He did not even want to care about human lives anymore. Pang Xiao was a person who had fought with blood on the battlefield. Once he became cold, the murderous aura around him could freeze the air. Li Qiqian felt a sense of superiority when facing Pang Xiao's submission. However, when facing a furious Pang Xiao, he really did not dare to provoke him. Forget it. Do as you wish. Li Qiqian thought that a wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. He did not want Pang Xiao to go berserk in front of him and hurt him. Pang Xiao saw through Li Qiqian's misgivings and could not help but sneer. When Qin Yining was by his side, he only felt that the years were peaceful and everything was worth looking forward to. Now that Qin Yining had disappeared, he was the only one left to search desperately. Only then did he understand that his peaceful years were tied to that person. If this person did not exist in this world, then what was the point of living a peaceful life? It was better to destroy everything. After Li Qiqian returned to the capital, he sent a memorial every 4 or 5 days to urge Pang Xiao to return to the capital. However, Pang Xiao acted as if he did not see it. He continued to search for clues in the vicinity of the old capital and continued to expand outwards. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. It was snowing heavily in the old capital. Pang Xiao had resisted 23 imperial edicts, and the imperial censor had reported them more than 50 times. However, Li Qiqian had not issued any edicts, as if he was indulging him. This was the first time this had happened since the establishment of Daju. Just as Pang Xiao was anxiously searching for Qin Yining's whereabouts, outside the Xiongmen Pass in the north of Daju, a caravan was passing through a vast desert in Taitan territory with difficulty. Chapter 469. The best part of the journey from Daju to the Taitan capital wasn't as bad as it was now. However, along the way, they encountered all kinds of trouble. Who knew where so many bandits came from, forcing the team to enter the desert. Qin Yining was wearing a coarse cotton dress that was so dirty that the color couldn't be seen. She had a coarse scarf wrapped around her head and face. She held a thick and strong branch in her hand as she followed the team with difficulty. Her injuries had already healed, but her body was weaker than before. They had already been in the desert for 10 days. In fact, if they weren't unlucky enough to encounter the sandstorm, they wouldn't be in such a miserable state. At least the water they brought was enough to eat. It was a pity that the heavens seemed to like playing tricks on them. Qin Yining also didn't expect that the Taytan people would travel thousands of miles to Daeju to find the treasure. Moreover, they had been searching for the treasure for a long time. When the heavens and earth were shaking, she and the others were just about to reach the entrance of the cave when they were stopped by the Taytan prince consort Sai Qin's men. Sai Qin looked like a handsome scholar who didn't look like a Taytan man. However, he was actually a cruel and merciless person who didn't show any mercy when killing people. At that time, the Dragon Stallion army didn't leave anyone alive. Lu Heng's men, including her and Mrs. Liao, were all brought out. However, after entering the desert and encountering the sandstorm, all of Lu Heng's men were abandoned in the desert by Sai Qin. He didn't kill them directly. Instead, he chased them into the yellow sand and left them to fend for themselves. In this team, there was the Taytan prince consort Sai Qin and 20 men of sacrifice that Sai Qin had brought. Mrs. Liao and 2 followers from the Qingtian alliance, Lu Heng and Qin Yining. Qin Yining's feet felt like they were filled with lead. Her lips were dry and cracked, and she was so thirsty that she couldn't speak. The last time she drank water was early in the morning, and everyone drank a mouthful to moisten their throats. At that time, Qin Yining couldn't bear to swallow the saliva. Instead, he kept it in his mouth for a long time so that it wouldn't feel too dry during the journey. But even so, they still didn't have enough water. Stop. Sai Qin stopped the team. Qin Yining was panting as he supported himself with a tree branch. He wanted to see what Sai Qin was going to do. Sai Qin walked straight to Mrs. Liao and the 2 Qingtian alliance members. He spoke in fluent Daeju language. "We don't have enough water right now. You must tell me where the treasure is, or I will leave you here." Mrs. Liao was silent. The 2 members of the Azure Sky Alliance were on the verge of tears. They were the ones who received the least amount of water. Was he going to leave them here? Hurry up and tell them. That's right. Why are you still hiding things at this time? If you don't tell me, you'll lose your life. Is the treasure more important than your life? You've already killed so many of our brothers, and now you want to kill us too. The 2 people's mouths were dry, and their voices were hoarse and unpleasant, but they still spared no effort in persuading Mrs. Liao. Mrs. Liao looked haggard and her cheeks were sunken, but she still smiled confidently. "To tell you the truth, I'm the only one who knows the location of the treasure. If you let me die, then you won't get the treasure for the rest of your life." Sai Qin adjusted his scarf and said without raising his eyebrows, "And then? You mean you don't want to tell me?" Mrs. Liao said, "Unless you agree to my conditions, I won't tell you the location of the treasure." When Sai Qin heard this, his eyebrows curved into a smile. A dimple appeared on his handsome face, making him seem very amiable and likable. "We don't care about the treasure at all. If you want to tell us, I can let you live. If you don't want to tell us, then we don't care about the treasure." Sai Qin waved his hand, and 2 strong men pulled the 2 spineless Qingtian alliance members away. They walked 100 steps and threw them onto the sand. The 2 people ate a mouthful of sand, but they didn't dare to stay. They struggled to get up, spat out the sand in their mouths, and staggered back. Mrs. Liao saw the 2 people return, and her smile became more confident. The Emperor of Daeju and the late Emperor of Dian both needed the treasure and wanted it for themselves. "You say you don't care about it, but I don't believe you. How can you prove it to me?" Sai Qin was amused by Mrs. Liao. "You're an interesting woman, but without the treasure, my army is still my army. There's no difference between you and me. If you don't want to tell us, then so be it. You guys go away together. We will no longer provide you with water and food. You can only pray for your own fortune." After saying this, Sai Qin smiled and nodded to Mrs. Liao. Then, he turned back and led everyone away. She really didn't want the treasure? Qin Yining was suspicious. The treasure was hidden by Mrs. Liao. Apart from the person who would definitely be silenced, Mrs. Liao might really be the only one who knew the whereabouts of the treasure. She said she was going to give up on Mrs. Liao. Was she deliberately trying to scare her? Mrs. Liao thought she could use the treasure to negotiate, but who knew that the other party would be so straightforward and give up just like that? Qin Yining watched from the sidelines for so many days. Chin was actually a very strange person. He looked like a scholar, but he was actually very skilled in martial arts. He wasn't weak at all. According to Tianjiz's calculations, one of the 3 malefic stars, Tan Lang, was in the Titan. Combined with Chin's achievements and rumors in the Titan, he should be the Grand Marshal who fought with Jiziyu for many years. The Titan Princess Anari supported the Prince Regent passed away due to illness. Anari became the Titan's female Khan, and Chin became Anari's son-in-law. Even so, Chin was still in charge of the Titan army. Every day, he made Anari happy. He could also do some of his own things in private. For example, he kidnapped so many people while searching for the treasure. Therefore, Qin Yining felt that Chin's action of giving up the treasure was strange. Shouldn't the people who feed the army plan for more food and provisions? Qin Yining didn't want to talk because she needed to maintain her strength. Chin really did what he said. Mrs. Liao and the 2 Qingtian alliance members chased after the group. They stumbled all the way and could fall at any time. However, Chin really didn't give them a drop of water or a bite of food. He didn't catch up until the 3 of them fell behind. Qin Yining also wanted to save them. However, she didn't have water or food. When Chin distributed the remaining water, Qin Yining had a whole new level of respect for Qin Yining. He would first let the 20 death warriors who followed him drink water first. Chin would restrain himself and drink a mouthful of water. He would only give the rest to the kidnapped people. Lu Heng had the highest status in Chin's heart, so he was given the most water. Qin Yining was second. Now that Mrs. Liao and the other 2 had been abandoned, if they still couldn't get out of the desert, she would be the next one to give up. Qin Yining knew this, so she calmly thought of a solution while walking. Qin Yining was quiet, never threw a tantrum, and was very patient. Chin couldn't help but walk beside her. Chapter 470. Qin Yining actually didn't have the energy to chat anymore. She was injured and had lost blood again. Her body, which had not recovered, was damaged again. Moreover, she had been kidnapped this time and didn't have the means to properly recover. Therefore, she was very weak right now. If it weren't for the fact that she had been holding on with one last breath, gritting her teeth and telling herself that she couldn't relax, she might really be abandoned here once she relaxed. She might also become a burden that they abandoned. It's nothing much. I just want to live. Qin Yining's throat was unbearably dry. She didn't want to say anything else and only gave this answer indifferently. She didn't even look at Chin. Chin became even more interested when she saw her indifference. If you were an ordinary woman, you would have tried your best to flatter me in order to live a better life. However, you are different from them. Qin Yining looked straight ahead and said, "You should speak less and conserve more energy." Chin was refuted, but she wasn't angry. Instead, she laughed to herself as she walked beside Qin Yining. Her laughter was hoarse, but there was joy from the bottom of her heart. The men of sacrifice walking in front couldn't help but turn back to look at her. Then, they turned back to whisper again. Even though they had been trekking in the desert for so long, Qin Yining's appearance was still beautiful in the eyes of these men. Unlike the tall and strong Titan women, Qin Yining, who was a beauty born in Jiangnan, was very different in the eyes of these men. If she wasn't the princess consort of Pang Zhishi, these men would have some thoughts about her. However, Chin didn't allow them to make a move on her. Now that they saw Chin laughing like that, the men all understood. It seemed that the prince consort's heart had been moved and he had feelings for this beauty. Although Anari Khan is also beautiful, she is also very beautiful. However, her tyrannical and domineering attitude towards others had already made them tired of her beauty. This delicate and weak beauty was the polar opposite of Anari. As the men walked, they thought that if Chin had feelings for this girl, they would find a way to help him cover it up. However, as soon as these people formed their thoughts, a cloud of dust approached from the front. What was coming from afar was actually a group of horses. "Prince consort, look." The one in front put his hand on his forehead and looked into the distance. He shouted excitedly, "It's our people." It was the Khan. "The Khan is here." It really is Khan, Prince Consort, we're saved. The men were no longer dispirited as they cheered loudly in excitement. Sai Qin was also overjoyed and hurried to greet him. Qin Yining leaned on a tree branch and stood in place, exchanging glances with Lu Heng, who was also in a similar sorry state. Their group of people had been kidnapped. When they set off, there were more than 10 of them, but now only the 2 of them were left. Their eyes were filled with the joy of surviving a calamity and the confusion of the unknown future. None of them knew how Inari would treat them. At this moment, Sai Qin had already rushed to the front of the group. Inari, you're here. A beautiful woman in a bright red riding outfit and a silver-white snow fox fur cloak urged her horse forward. Her appearance couldn't be considered outstanding, but her facial features could be considered regular. However, the aura around her was very valiant. Her every movement revealed a valiant and domineering aura. When she saw Sai Qin, a smile appeared on her face. She reined in her horse and jumped down. Like a little girl who was looking forward to being cherished, she quickly walked forward. It wasn't easy to find you. You were gone for so long, but you refused to let anyone pass a message to me. You made me so worried. Sai Qin held Inari's hands, a gentle smile on his handsome face. How did you find your way to the desert? I brought some people along the way to pick you up, but we didn't manage to find you. Later on, I heard that a group of people had been attacked by bandits and were heading in the direction of the desert. I was worried that you had encountered a calamity, so I wanted to chase after you. It was my people who reminded me that it would be better to take the official road back to the capital and then come here from the capital. Otherwise, we would also be trapped in the desert. Sai Qin smiled and touched Inari's face. You're so nice. Inari's face instantly flushed red. He said uncomfortably, for your safety, I should do anything. Did you have fun in Daeju this time? It was all right. We didn't get the treasure, but we caught a few people. There wasn't enough water on the way, so I threw some people away. Now, there are only 2 left. Sai Qin pointed behind him as he spoke. Inari looked in the direction of Sai Qin's finger and met Lu Heng and Qin Yining's gazes. Being exposed to the wind and the sun in the desert, even if a celestial being descended from the heavens, he wouldn't look any better. Moreover, Qin Yining and Lu Heng were wearing coarse clothes and dirty scarves covered in sand. Their hair was also in a mess. Inari glanced at them casually and asked, "Who are they?" One of them is the second son of the Lu family in Daeju. The other is the princess consort of Prince Zhongxian. Initially, I caught a survivor of the Qingtian alliance. However, the Qingtian alliance refused to tell me the whereabouts of the treasure. Keeping them would only be a waste of water and food, so I threw them away. Millimeter, you did well. Inari ordered someone to bring out a water bottle and distribute the water and dry food to everyone. Sai Qin and Inari sat at the side, chatting and laughing softly. Qin Yining and Lu Heng were given a half-empty water bag and a dry biscuit each. Qin Yining didn't dare to eat it all at once, in case something unexpected happened along the way. He only ate a few bites of the tasteless dry biscuits with cold water. Lu Heng frowned as he ate. He said softly, "It's been hard on you. You're still weak." Qin Yining smiled bitterly and said softly, "I'm already lucky to be alive. If the Khan hadn't rushed over, I would have been the next one thrown away." Lu Heng smiled bitterly as well. No one expected that they would end up like this after coming here for the treasure. They didn't know how Inari would treat them when they reached the Taytan capital. When Qin Yining and Lu Heng were talking, Inari and Sai Qin's attention was on the 2 of them. Sai Qin said softly, "The Lu family's second master Lu and Minister Qin's daughter aren't simple people. We can take them back and temporarily raise them. Even if we can't get any secrets about the treasure, we can use them as hostages to negotiate with the Jew emperor. We can also make a lot of money. I believe that this will bring us more benefits than the treasure." Inari smiled. "You're right. We'll do as you say. The Khan always indulges me like this. It makes me feel bad." Sai Qin said shyly. Inari looked at Sai Qin's handsome face and couldn't help but blush. He said, "You and I are husband and wife. Shouldn't I support you? How can you indulge me? Chapter 471. Chin's face tightened when he heard this, his expression turning serious as he said, "How could I be such a person? My feelings for the Khan are true, heaven and earth can prove it. The Khan is such an extraordinary woman, she is much more beautiful than those who only have look. I admire and adore the Khan, my feelings for the Khan have never changed after all these years." Chin's gaze was too passionate, causing Anari's face to turn red. She looked at Chin with both joy and shyness as she muttered, "Of course I trust the prince consort's character." Chin was moved as he held onto Anari's hands and slowly leaned over. Anari looked down in embarrassment and closed her eyes, waiting for the kiss to come. When the men at the side saw this, they drank water and ate their rations while trying to hold back their laughter. In their hearts, they were praising the prince consort for being so powerful. He was both handsome and talented. Only such a man would be able to tame such a shrewish woman like the Khan. Perhaps because there were too many people around, Chin did not kiss Anari and only rubbed his forehead against hers. Such an intimate action was even more arousing than a kiss. Anari was treated so preciously, how could she remember anything else? She only felt that she was about to melt into a puddle of water and melt into Chin's gentleness. That little bit of suspicion just now had long been thrown out of the window. However, when she glanced at Qin Yining and saw Qin Yining's face that could not hide his beauty under the dirt, Anari still felt stifled in her heart. This kind of vixen was really annoying. The group rested for a while before they set off again. This time, they had enough water and rations, and they could confirm their direction. They also knew that they would be able to leave the desert soon. Everyone's mood was different from before, and they were all relaxed and happy. However, as captives, Qin Yining and Lu Heng were not assigned horses. They still had to rely on their feet to walk behind the group of horses. Qin Yining tried her best to steady her breathing. She told herself that at least she had water and food now. She didn't have to worry about these people abandoning her in the desert. If Pang Xiao was here, she might have fainted without worry. But when there was no one around to rely on, she had to be strong. Finally, after walking for an entire day, they saw the oasis at the end of the desert in the evening. That was not a mirage, but an oasis that truly existed in front of his eyes. They finally left the desert and set foot on the territory of the Tartars. Everyone rested for a while in a nearby tribe. When they heard that the Khan and the prince consort had come to visit, the leader immediately offered up his most spacious and clean tent and served them the most delicious roasted meat and milk wine. Qin Yining and Lu Heng were finally able to wash off the sand on their bodies and change into clean tartan clothes. The clothes that the leader offered were all exquisite. Inside was a long robe with narrow sleeves that had a slit on both sides. On the outside was a light yellow outer robe with long sleeves that reached the elbows. The outermost layer was a red brocade waistcoat with a round collar and a row of pure silver buttons that shone with a silver light. Her hair was neatly tied up by a maid. She wore a hat with red agate and silver tassel pendants on both sides. In the middle of the hat, a row of red agate tassel beads fell in front of her forehead, right between her eyebrows. It made her palm-sized face look as white and tender as cream. The maid smiled and communicated with her in Tatan language. Qin Yining didn't understand what she was saying, so she politely smiled at her. The maid mumbled something and brought a pair of red soft boots inlaid with lace for her. Qin Yining smiled and thanked her, then put on the boots. The maid looked at Qin Yining, and her eyes lit up. She excitedly circled around her and looked at her for a while. Then, she said something, covered her face with her hands, and excitedly walked out. Qin Yining frowned slightly. She tiredly lay down on the wooden bed by the window. She was alert and didn't dare to fall asleep. However, the exhaustion from the long journey in the desert was not something that an ordinary person could endure. Moreover, she had just recovered from her injuries and hadn't eaten her fill. Qin Yining unknowingly fell asleep. Not long after, Chin walked into the tent and saw the beauty lying by the window. The agate beads and tassels hung on her forehead, softly supporting her white cheeks. Her other arm was resting on her waist. Because she was sleeping on her side, the close-fitting long robe and waistcoat outlined her mountain-like figure vividly. Sai-Chin stood at the door in a daze. He stared at her for a long time, but he didn't remember what he was doing. It wasn't until she heard the crackling sound of a small pile of firewood burning in the middle of the ground that Sai-Chin recovered from her stupor in shock. Daeju was a wonderful place. The land was rich in water and resources. Even the women were delicate and fair. Their skin was as white as milk tofu. That was why he was so obsessed with the land in the south. Compared to the Taytan, where most of the tribes were nomadic, Daeju was a farming country that was more suitable for long-term development. Sai-Chin slowly walked towards Qin Yining. His footsteps were very light, like a cat that was tiptoeing. He slowly approached the bed. He reached out his right hand, which was wearing a red agate ring. Just as his fingertips were about to touch Qin Yining's cheek, the beauty on the bed suddenly opened her eyes and looked straight at him. When Sai-Chin's eyes met hers, he was so shocked by her sharp gaze that he forgot to continue moving. Qin Yining frowned. She slapped his hand away and stood up. She stared at him with sharp eyes and said in a cold and sharp voice, "What is Prince Consort doing?" Sai-Chin's hand burned with pain from the slap. He clenched his fist and placed it behind his back. He smiled warmly and said, "There's a bonfire up ahead. They're preparing to roast a whole lamb. I came to call you over to eat together." Qin Yining narrowed his eyes and said, "I don't understand what Prince Consort means." "You don't understand? What don't you understand?" Sai-Chin's eyes stared straight at her opening and closing cherry lips. Qin Yining said, "On the way here, Prince Consort treated me the same as the other captives. Other than occasionally speaking normally, we didn't have any interactions. You're the high and mighty Prince Consort, and your wife is the Taytan Khan. Right now, I'm just a captive under your control. In this kind of situation, I don't even have the right to eat a whole lamb. Even if you wanted me to eat it, why would Prince Consort have to personally lower himself and act like that?" Sai-Chin's eyes flashed. Gradually, a smile appeared on his face. "You really are an intelligent woman. I didn't expect you to be so sharp." Qin Yining looked back at him with an expression that said, "Don't tease me. There's such an obvious difference. Anyone would be able to tell, right? Or is it because Prince Consort is too confident in himself? Do you think that as long as you show a good face, all women will be charmed until they lose their sense of direction?" When Sai-Chin heard this, his eagle eyes immediately narrowed. His gaze was filled with a strong murderous intent. Chapter 472. When Qin Yining saw Sai-Chin's expression, she immediately knew what was going on. At first, she had felt that Sai-Chin's behavior was very strange. Just as she had said, Sai-Chin's attitude towards people in the desert was very different from when he had met the Khan. She did not care about his attitude towards others, but Sai-Chin had not treated her in any special way at the beginning. Why was he acting as if he was deeply attracted to her now? She was not so naive as to think that there would be a chance for them to develop feelings for each other over time. Therefore, Qin Yining felt that there was something fishy going on. Sai-Chin was able to become the most respected person in Taytan after Inari. It was impossible for him to be as pure and loyal as he appeared to be. Furthermore, there were two other people who were equally as famous as Sai-Chin. One was her husband, and the other was Ji Zheyu. Qin Yining knew very well what kind of people they were. Qin Yining would never believe Sai-Chin's actions today. She had just arrived, so she had to be extremely vigilant to prevent herself from falling into a trap. Qin Yining thought for a long time, but it only took a moment. Sai-Chin also immediately retracted the coldness in his eyes, as if he was not the person who had been filled with killing intent just now. Princess really knows how to joke. It seems that Prince Zhongshuren dotes on Princess a lot. Qin Yining smiled but did not say anything. Sai-Chin continued, "You don't need to be nervous. Since you know that Prince Zhongshuren does not care about you, then he will agree to whatever conditions we discuss with him. He will definitely spare your life. Naturally, your life will not be in danger." Qin Yining could not help but smile when she heard this. Then I have to thank Prince Consort for not killing me. Sai Qin didn't get angry when she heard this. Instead, she felt that Qin Yining's eyes were so bright and alluring that one couldn't help but want to look into her watery eyes. He took a few steps forward, raised his hand, and slid his finger across Qin Yining's cheek. However, she tilted her head and avoided his touch. At last it touched the chain of onyx beads that hung over her cheek under her bonnet. The bead chain swayed, and the sound of the agate beads colliding with each other was very crisp. Sai Qin looked down at Qin Yining. From his angle, he could see the undisguised disgust and contempt on her pretty face. You don't have to be angry with me. If you really want to be angry, you should be angry that your man didn't protect you well. Why did I let you come out alone and experience so many dangers along the way? I even brought you back to Tayton. You should know that your injuries were originally very serious. It was only because I found someone to treat you that you barely managed to keep your life. Don't you people from Daeju all grow up reading books? Don't tell me that you don't know the meaning of gratitude. When Qin Yining heard this, the anger in her heart surged. She suddenly raised her head and glared at Sai Qin. In a cold voice, she said, "Why should I be grateful to someone who kidnapped me? How do you know that I need you to save my life? I would rather die on Daeju's soil and leave my corpse to my husband than let him search for me tirelessly like a headless fly and suffer all the time. In the end, I would even become a bargaining chip that you used to threaten him because of my ignoble existence." When she was angry, her eyes were so bright that they seemed to be lit by two clusters of flames. Looking at her, Sai Qin's heart was ignited with a scorching fire. He grabbed Qin Yining's neck and forced her to raise her head to look at him. His malicious eyes stared into her eyes, and his voice seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. "You better not be joking with me. I'm a serious person. If you say that, I won't be able to resist the urge to kill you." Qin Yining was choked until she couldn't breathe, but she still refused to give in. She glared fiercely at Sai Qin and said with difficulty, "I'm also a serious person. If you don't kill me, I'll be disappointed." Sai Qin had never met a woman who was so unafraid of death. Perhaps he had met one in the past, but those women were far from being as beautiful and unforgettable as Qin Yining. She was a beautiful and intelligent woman of noble birth, but she also had such a hot temper. This made Sai Qin envious of Pang Xiao's luck with women. Why didn't he have such good luck to have such a lovely wife? "What are you doing?" Just as Qin Yining was about to suffocate and was waiting for death with her eyes closed, an angry roar suddenly came from the door. Anari quickly rushed in. She stood at the door and saw that Sai Qin and Qin Yining were so close together. She thought they were doing something intimate. She was so angry that her head was buzzing. She didn't care about anything else and roared loudly. She rushed in with the intention of teaching Qin Yining a lesson. But when she got closer, she realized that Sai Qin wasn't doing anything intimate with Qin Yining. He was clearly going to kill her. Although Anari didn't like Sai Qin touching other women, her anger had already dissipated by half. She couldn't help but ask in confusion, "What's going on? Didn't you want to use her to negotiate with Wang Yi from Daeju? If you kill her now, we'll have one less bargaining chip." Sai Qin seemed to have regained his rationality when he heard Anari's voice. He angrily slowly let go of her hand. As soon as he let go, Qin Yining's body couldn't help but sway. He fell to the ground and coughed violently. Sai Qin clasped his hands behind his back and looked at Qin Yining. He said in a low voice, "I'll let you off this time for the sake of the Khan. If you dare to provoke me again, it won't end so easily." After saying those harsh words, Sai Qin turned back to face Anari. He was as gentle as water again. Even when he smiled, his eyes were curved and his breath was mixed with honey. "Khan, I'm sorry to have frightened you." Sai Qin held Anari's hand. Anari looked at Sai Qin reproachfully. She didn't hide the displeasure in her voice as she said, "I'm not frightened. I'm just very angry. I thought that this vixen changed into a clean set of clothes and stole your soul." When Sai Qin heard this, his face instantly tensed up. "Khan, don't make such jokes in the future. Don't you know what kind of person I am? I've been in love with Khan for so long. Have you ever seen me seduce anyone? She's just an ordinary person. Even if a few fairies came from the heavens, they wouldn't be able to change my feelings for you. Anari was very moved by Sai-Chin's words. Her eyes were filled with tears as she obediently nestled against Sai-Chin's chest. She even rubbed against his chest like a spoiled kitten. Chapter 473. I've seen many women your age. But I've never seen a woman who isn't afraid of the enemy's sword. That day when you saved me, I saw you disregard your own safety and resolutely protect me. From then on, I only had you in my heart and in my eyes. No woman can be as outstanding as you, younger and more beautiful than you, and not have your talent and courage. But compared to your courage, I can't compare to your sincerity towards me. Khan, what else are you not confident about? In my heart, you're like a goddess. You're so precious that I wouldn't exchange it for 1,000 miles of land. Sai-Chin's voice was low and gentle, and every word was sincere. Anari's face immediately turned red. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to bury herself in Sai-Chin's arms and not come out. What are you talking about? How am I that good? I'm not beautiful enough, and I have a strong temper. You're the most elegant and outstanding man in Tayton. I've always known that you're the one who's at a disadvantage when we're together. Sai-Chin, don't blame me for being suspicious. I'm really afraid of losing you. You're so outstanding, and I'm not good enough for you. Silly girl. Sai-Chin used his finger to block Anari's lips. You're not allowed to belittle yourself like this. You're the Khan of Tayton, my wife, and my master. How are you not good enough for me? It's obvious that I'm not good enough for you. It's all my fault for making you feel so insecure. Anari, hit me. As long as you're not sad. How could I bear to? Anari raised her head and took the initiative to kiss Sai-Chin's cheek. Sai-Chin was touched by her lively and forthright action. He couldn't help but smile and lean over to kiss her. At this moment, Qin Yining was sitting on the ground with his eyes lowered. After listening to Sai-Chin and Anari's sweet talk for a long time, he got goosebumps all over his body. His suspicions about Sai-Chin grew even more. Although the relationship between husband and wife was good, it was normal for them to say such sweet words. However, between Sai-Chin and Anari, it was obvious that Anari was in a position of inferiority. Sai-Chin had to coax her with words so that she could live with him in a stable manner. Sai-Chin's words were so pleasant to the ears that it was as if he had recited them countless times in his head. But why did Sai-Chin treat Anari this way? Was it really just a husband's love for his wife? Qin Yining lowered her head. Her long eyelashes fluttered. Countless possibilities appeared in her mind, but they were all rejected by her after careful consideration. Qin Yining felt that there was still room for discussion as to how many of these pleasant words were true. In any case, if it were her, she wouldn't believe Sai-Chin. This was because to test a person's sincerity, one didn't have to pay attention to what the other party said, but what they did. No matter how much Sai-Chin said, it was an indisputable fact that he had taken the initiative to enter another woman's tent. Who would believe that they were going to interrogate the hostages, let alone interrogate them? Only a woman as honest as Anari would believe him. Qin Yining made up her mind that she should properly investigate the power structure of the Tayton during this period of time. She felt that Sai-Chin was too cunning, while Anari was too honest. With the two of them together, Sai-Chin could easily set up a trap for Anari to fall into. Sai-Chin was only the emperor's son-in-law. No matter how outstanding he was, in the eyes of others, he was still someone who relied on women to get to where he was. Perhaps there were already disagreements between the two of them. And these were the factors that she could use to escape. At this moment, she suddenly felt a sharp pain on her scalp. She suddenly came back to her senses and realized that Anari had grabbed her hat. Even her hair that was hidden under the hat was pulled up, forcing her to stand up with Anari's strength. You slutty fox. In the future, stay away from Ben Khan's men. If you're really so thirsty that you can't leave a man, don't blame Ben Khan for finding a dozen warriors to serve you. When had Qin Yining ever suffered such humiliation in her life? She was the kind of person who would rather die standing than live kneeling. Anari actually dared to grab her hair and say such disgusting words. Qin Yining wasn't going to back down. She immediately grabbed her hand and forcefully pulled it away. She then stood up and said mockingly, "I have long heard that the position of Khan of Tartar has been changed to a woman. Actually, when I heard about how the female regent of Tartar manages the state, I was already very curious and full of admiration for you. I just didn't expect that the regent that I admired would become a completely different person after becoming the Khan. Or have you always been a woman without confidence, always paranoid and worried that your husband would fall for another woman? If you're really that capable, you should be confident that your husband wouldn't fall for anyone else other than you. But look at you now. You didn't keep your own dog on a leash and you're blaming others. We're both women, but you can still say such disgusting words. Don't you feel ashamed of your manners?" Qin Yining's voice was clear and loud, like pearls falling on a jade plate. She spoke so quickly that no one could interrupt her. Anari was so angry that her face turned ashen. She pointed at Qin Yining and was so angry that she couldn't say anything. Who are you calling a dog? Didn't you hear it very clearly? It's really strange. How can there be people in this world who like to be scolded? Do you want me to scold you again so that you can listen carefully? How dare you? Good, you're still twisting words and forcing logic. You're clearly the one who used your beauty to seduce other people's men. You're afraid of death, so you want to live, so you seduced my man. Don't you think your actions are honorable? Which eye of yours saw me seducing? It's clearly your man who barged into my place. Even if I'm a hostage, you still need to use me to blackmail Pang Zhishi. Aren't you afraid that if I don't survive, Pang Zhishi will take revenge in anger? Anari was so angry that she actually slowly forced herself not to be angered by this vixen in front of her. She didn't want to lose face in front of the prince consort. She seemed to have heard an incredible joke, and she actually covered her mouth and laughed like a blooming flower. How interesting, how interesting. I've never seen you being so stubborn even though you're a captive. It seems like you don't care about life and death at all. You don't care whether we kill you or not. Anatri's fingers were still hurting because of Qin Yining's broken fingers. Looking at Qin Yining's face that became more and more beautiful in anger, the jealousy in her heart had already gushed out like magma. It was about to drown her. Anari pulled out an exquisite dagger embedded with gems from her boots and waved it towards Qin Yining's face. Chapter 474. Qin Yining did not expect Anari to be such a brainless person. She actually used a knife at the slightest disagreement. Her reaction was not slow either. She hurriedly took a step back and dodged the tip of the knife. However, no matter how nimble Qin Yining was, she did not know any martial arts. In a fit of anger, Anari was determined to make Qin Yining pay with her life. Even if she could not lose her life, she wanted to leave a few bloody scars on her face and turn her into a hideous monster. Anari used all her strength and aimed the knife at Qin Yining's face. Qin Yining nimbly dodged the knife, but her body was not organized. Because she had been weak for so long, her strength and stamina were not as valiant as Anari's. Soon, sweat appeared on her forehead. She tripped over herself and fell to the ground. Anari's eyes lit up. She saw an opportunity and immediately stabbed Qin Yining with the dagger. Sai Qin finally had enough of watching the show. He went forward and held Anari's wrist. "All right, calm down, Khan." His gentle voice seemed to have a magical power that could dispel one's anger. It calmed Anari down a little. "Why are you stopping me? Let me disfigure her face first. Let's see if she can seduce men with it." Sai Qin smiled as he took the dagger out of Anari's hand. He held her hand with one hand and said, "Silly girl, have you forgotten what I want to do with this woman? Do you know about the grudge between the Qin family and the Prince Zhongxian's family?" Anari thought for a moment before she nodded and said, "Her father killed Prince Zhongxian's father by driving a wedge between us." "That's right. Her family and Prince Zhongxian's family have a grudge against each other. Why do you think Prince Zhongxian is willing to marry such a woman?" Anari vaguely understood. "You mean, beauty?" Sai Qin nodded and said with a smile, Pang Zhishi likes her because of her face. If you destroy her face, Pang Zhishi won't like her anymore. What if he refuses to pay the ransom? Although it was right to think so, Anari still felt a little unbalanced. However, Anari's mood improved a little when he thought about the huge amount of gold and silver in the ransom. All right, Anari calmed down a little and smiled apologetically. I'm sorry, I was hot-headed and didn't think about the prince consort's plan. It's okay. I know you care about me. Sai Qin held her hand and shook it. Anari's face was completely red. She was both proud and happy. She chatted and laughed with Sai Qin for a while longer. Then, like a little girl, she happily went out to participate in the roast lamb bonfire. It was as if she wasn't the one who wanted to kill someone with a knife just now. Qin Yining wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead with his sleeve. He thought to himself that Anari was simply a brainless lunatic. Seeing Sai Qin coax Anari like a child, Qin Yining felt that Anari's anger was a joke in Sai Qin's eyes. She could be appeased so easily. There was definitely something wrong with this Sai Qin. Sai Qin smiled and said, "You saw it, right?" "Saw what?" "See how the prince consort coaxes the Khan?" Sai Qin's face was full of pride. He approached Qin Yining again and said softly, "In Tayton, the Khan listens to me the most. I have full confidence that I can persuade him to do anything." Sai Qin raised his hand and touched Qin Yining's cheek. "If you're willing to be with me, I'll immediately persuade the Khan to let you go. What do you think? You won't lose anything from this deal. You're already married anyway. Even if something happens between us, as long as I don't say anything, no one will know. Even if your man pays a ransom for you in the future, as long as we don't tell him, you'll still be pure and pure. You'll still belong to him." Slap. Qin Yining's palm landed heavily on Sai Qin's face. Her chest heaved up and down as she panted angrily. "Who do you think you are? How can someone like you be on the same level as my husband? That's an insult. Are you even a man? Despicable. Let me tell you, a good woman doesn't serve a second husband. I will never submit. You can kill me or torture me as you wish. But if you want me to be your vassal and drag out an ignoble existence, I'm sorry, but I can't do it." The corner of Sai Qin's mouth cracked from the slap, and blood slowly flowed out. Her cheek hurt even more, and it swelled up in an instant. Sai Qin's ears were ringing from the slap. He never imagined that such a gentle beauty could be so domineering when she was angry. She even dared to slap his face. "You really don't want to live anymore." Sai Qin spat out the bloody foam in her mouth. Qin Yining sneered, "I've already said that I'm not afraid of death. You can kill me and fulfill my wish." Sai Qin pursed her lips and glared angrily at Qin Yining. The most difficult person to deal with was someone like her, who wasn't afraid of anything and didn't want anything. She had no desires and was slippery, so he couldn't use any of his methods of coercion or enticement. He couldn't get hold of her weakness, which meant that he couldn't threaten her. As for enticement, he couldn't think of anything else that could move her. As for life and death, she didn't seem to be afraid at all. She didn't care about being killed at all. Instead, she cared about whether or not she would be a burden to Pang Zhishi. She was such an affectionate beauty, but her feelings weren't for him. Just looking at her made one's heart feel stifled. However, Qin Yining should be very concerned about whether or not Pang Zhishi would come to save her, right? Sai Qin thought about Qin Yining's reaction. A woman who had invested a lot in her relationship would naturally want to receive an equal return. If Pang Zhishi didn't come to save her, or if it was just a formality, she would probably be sad, right? Although Qin Yining didn't say it, Sai Qin could feel Qin Yining's feelings. Women were such emotional creatures. Anari was like this, and Qin Yining was also like this. Sai Qin touched the corner of his mouth with the tip of his tongue and tasted blood. He spat out a mouthful of blood and turned to leave angrily. Qin Yining watched coldly as he left. Only then did she relax her tightly clenched fists and fall onto the bed. She had finally survived this ordeal. She rubbed her slightly swollen forehead. Her face was a little pale from the double torture of physical and mental fatigue. Qin Yining lay down again and even covered herself with the blanket. She was now in Taytan territory. Anari was a brainless madman, and Sai-Chin was also a scum who was used to acting. They could barge in at any time. Qin Yining felt that she could rest. She still needed to rest well. If she rested well, she would be able to deal with any unexpected situations at any time. Qin Yining was very alert in her sleep. However, even if it was only a light sleep, it was still better than the previous period of wandering in the desert. The next morning, the maid who had helped her wash up and change her clothes yesterday came again. She helped her with her makeup and smiled as she spoke to her in Taytan. Qin Yining didn't understand her words and looked at her in confusion. Chapter 475. Qin Yining didn't want to go at first, but she thought that this was a rare opportunity to go out and explore the terrain. Regardless of whether she had to escape or not, she had to familiarize herself with the surroundings. The maid lifted the curtain and respectfully helped Qin Yining out. Outside the tent was a lush green grassland. White tents with round roofs were arranged in a picturesque manner, and colorful flags fluttered in the wind. 500 steps away, many commoners gathered and shouted. There was a group of men and women riding horses in the middle of the field. They held the reins and bent over the horses. They exerted strength in their legs and raised their buttocks slightly, allowing the horses to gallop on the field like an arrow released from a bow. Every time they passed by the crowd, there would be cheers. Anari, who was dressed in Red Riding attire and riding a white horse, cheered the loudest. Good. Good. The Khan is mighty. The Khan is a hero among women. The Khan is the most outstanding woman in Taytan. The crowd was excited and cheered. Accompanied by the sound of the horses' hooves, everyone felt a burst of joy from the bottom of their hearts. Even Qin Yining, who had been kidnapped as a hostage, couldn't help but feel a little better when she saw this scene. The maid pointed at the horse track and whispered something. She looked at Qin Yining with smiling eyes, as if she was waiting for her answer. Qin Yining finally understood. The maid wanted to invite her to watch the horse race. Qin Yining smiled and nodded in thanks. Okay, I'll do as you say. Thank you for telling me about the commotion outside. The maid didn't quite understand Qin Yining, but when she saw her gentle smile and beautiful face, she couldn't help but blush. Her eyes sparkled as she said something. Then she pointed at the horse track and pulled Qin Yining in that direction. Qin Yining looked around and made sure that although there were people following her after she walked out of the tent, no one stopped her. Naturally, this was not a decision that a mere maid could make. Sai-Chin must have given her the right to do as she pleased. How confident was this man? Wasn't he afraid that she would escape halfway? Qin Yining followed the maid's footsteps and walked slowly on the green grass towards the horse track. His breath was filled with the fragrance of grass and the faint smell of livestock. The air here didn't smell bad at all. Instead, it made people feel relaxed. Even the sky and the white clouds seemed especially high up here. As Qin Yining came closer, many of the tall men watching the fight outside noticed her. Although she was considered tall among the women in Jiangnan, her height was only average when it came to Taytan. However, even though she was of the same height, her figure was more delicate than most Taytan women. The most important thing was that she had learned the etiquette of the way she walked, which made her look different from the simple Taytan women they usually saw. She seemed to exude a sense of nobility from her bones, not to mention that she also had a beautiful face that was difficult to describe. The men on the periphery could not help but stare at her with infatuation, and spread to the sides. Gradually, more and more people saw her, and whether men or women, they could not help but stare at her with infatuation. Moses parted the sea for her. Even the cheers and shouts that had been incessantly ringing out died down in an instant. Qin Yining felt a little uncomfortable being stared at like this. After all, whether it was in Dian or Daeju, for the past 2 years, she had always worn a veiled hat when she went out to meet outsiders. Although she had to show her face when she was a child, no one stared at her like this at that time. Moreover, the Taytan herdsmen were simple and honest. They liked what they liked and disliked what they hated. They did not restrain their gazes at her, and it made her feel uncomfortable all over. However, Even though she felt uncomfortable, Chin Yining could not show her fear. She expressionlessly walked all the way to the front of the field. Through the wooden fence, she looked at the horses running in circles in the field. She pretended to be watching the horse race seriously, but she secretly looked further away to observe the surrounding terrain. Anari very happily enjoyed the praise and cheers of her subjects. Listening to the worship and praise, she felt great satisfaction in her heart. She could not help but work harder to show off her riding skills to win more praise. She also wanted people to know that although she was the only female Khan in the Taytan for decades, she was also a heroine who was not inferior to men. Who knew that the cheers that originally made her blood boil suddenly weakened for some reason. Anari was a little puzzled and a little unhappy. She urged her horse to gallop, and when she came to the crowd, she showed a confident smile, but she saw a beautiful figure in the crowd that did not fit in with the other herdsmen. Anari frowned unhappily and quickly stopped the white horse. The horse was suddenly stopped, and it neighed, raised its head high, and stomped a few times on the ground uneasily. Anari sat on the horse and looked down at Chin Yining. She raised her eyebrows and raised her chin, saying, "Who allowed you to come out? Ben Khan did not allow an ugly person like you to walk around in the camp." Chin Yining heard this and only smiled faintly, saying, "No one stopped me, and I don't have the strength to truss a chicken, so I can't escape from your camp. I heard that the Taytan are the most hospitable people. The Khan shouldn't go against the customs passed down from your ancestors, right? You." Anari was speechless. She frowned unhappily and sneered, "Who doesn't know that you have a sharp tongue, and you are the best at absolving yourself of any crime? You are just relying on your beauty to get people to make things easy for you, and go around seducing other men." Chin Yining knitted her brows tightly. They were both women, but this person dared to say such vicious words to her, who was also a woman, in front of so many people. The most important thing was that she did not have any evidence, and it was all based on her guess. It could be seen that this Khan had been pampered since he was young. After getting married, it had always been like this. And such a straightforward person had an extremely complicated son-in-law. Chin Yining did not want to meddle in other people's business, and there was no need to remind her enemy. She only knew that she could not lose her composure and become a joke. "The Khan is so young and beautiful, why would you say such vicious words? I always thought that only women who lacked confidence would be suspicious of their husbands. Moreover, I am a married woman, and my husband is a great hero who shakes the world. When I was in my boudoir, I was familiar with women's teachings, women's precepts, and legend of a fierce woman. I understand the principle that a good woman does not serve a second husband. I will never do such a thing that would disgrace my ancestors. If the Khan wants to make up a crime to accuse me of, it would be best to find a decent one." Although Chin Yining's words did not have a single dirty word, but she had ridiculed Anari's knowledge and character. The herdsmen around them listened and whispered to each other, and many people were secretly discussing what kind of person Chin Yining was. There were also some who did not know who she was, and they were also asking around. Chapter 476. Chin Yining smiled. Her smile was so bright that it took one's breath away. Khan really knows how to joke. To convince others, you need to have substance and reason. If you can't argue, it can only mean that you don't have reason or your thoughts are unclear. Khan, don't belittle all Taytan women. Besides, it's traditional for women in Daju to follow etiquette and etiquette. This is because of the environment in which they grew up. Just like how Taytan women follow their tribes to seek survival from a young age and learn many praiseworthy skills, women who are able to live dutifully in this world are not inferior to anyone else. It's just that different environments create different lives and specializations. Khan is a heroine who doesn't lose out to men, but you shouldn't belittle yourself. Chin Yining's reasoning was so strong that Anari's brain couldn't process it. She could only stare at her annoying face, wishing that she could use a knife to cut her face a few times to vent her anger. In front of her subjects, she was a kidnapped hostage, yet she dared to provoke her like this. Anari coldly reprimanded, "Don't show off your little bit of knowledge. Ben Khan is naturally a heroine who doesn't lose out to men." Unlike you, you're just a dodder flower hiding behind a man. If you really have some ability, then show it to Ben Khan. Won't that be enough to convince him? Right now, you're just talking nonsense. What's so great about that? Qin Yining smiled and said, Then Khan, tell me, as the legitimate daughter of a minister of the imperial court, as a princess consort, what ability should I show you? You. If you have the ability, then don't show off in front of your father and man. How about we have a fair competition? Anari was determined to make things difficult for Qin Yining. She looked around and then raised her whip. Let's compete in horsemanship. Qin Yining raised her eyebrows. She turned her eyes and tactfully refused. Khan is skilled in horsemanship. How can I be a match for Khan? Let's not compete. Qin Yining's voice was soft and gentle, revealing the unique gentleness of a southern woman. Some of the herdsmen around them could understand Da Ju's language, so they passed on the information to the people around them. Everyone looked at the beautiful woman and felt that her words were very sincere. The Khan grew up on horseback since he was a child. How could a rich young lady from Da Ju compare to him? They had heard that there were many women from official families in Da Ju who had to bind their feet until they were crippled. They even said that they were beautiful. How could a woman who couldn't even stand properly know how to ride a horse? With this thought in mind, some honest herdsmen curiously looked at Qin Yining's feet. However, the robe covered his feet and they couldn't see clearly. Anari smirked and mocked, That's why I said you're just an embroidered pillow who only knows how to talk. If you don't want to compete, then so be it. I'll just treat you Da Ju women as people who only have looks. If you're an ordinary woman who doesn't know how to ride a horse, then I'll let it go. I didn't expect Ji Panan's family to raise such a daughter who doesn't even have the courage to accept the challenge. Anari shook her head as she said this, as if she was very sorry. I really feel sorry for Ji Panan. His reputation is going to be ruined by you. Everyone could finally see it now. The Khan hated this woman from Da Ju from the bottom of his heart. The reason might be that this beautiful woman had something to do with the Khan's son-in-law. Some of the married women couldn't stand seeing their men having anything to do with young and beautiful women. Therefore, they could understand why Anari refused to let go of Qin Yining. They all spoke out to support her, saying that if Qin Yining didn't dare to accept the challenge, then she would lose the face of all the women in Da Ju. Qin Yining didn't want to compete at first. In other people's territory, no matter if she won or lost, the other party would find an excuse to slander her. Moreover, she could feel that after being injured and losing blood again, and after the torment in the desert, her body was not as good as before. She didn't have the strength she used to have. But she was never a person who would easily back down. Anari's clamor successfully evoked her courage. She would rather lose than avoid the challenge. Otherwise, she wouldn't have the face to say that she was Ji Panan's daughter and Prince Zhongxian's wife. Okay. Qin Yining took a few steps forward and went around to Anari through a gap in the wooden fence. She said, But I don't have a horse. Anari raised her hand, and one of the men who had stopped racing led a red horse over. The horse was tall and strong, with a long mane. It looked like a wild horse. Some of the people in the tribe who recognized the horse began to worry for Qin Yining. This horse was originally a wild horse, but because it was injured and was rescued by them, they kept it by their side. Once its injuries were healed, they wanted to tame this horse, but even the man with the best horsemanship in the tribe took 3 months to barely make this horse bow its head to him. Moreover, this horse was very stubborn. After recognizing the man as its master, it was only willing to let him ride it alone, and no one else could touch it. Anari had seen the horse before the race, so of course she knew how wild it was. She smiled mockingly. Then, I'll give you this one. The man led the horse over and threw the reins and whipped to Qin Yining. Qin Yining slowly walked towards the red horse under the watchful eyes of the onlookers. Princess, you have to be careful. Lu Heng and Sai Qin had unknowingly arrived at the side. Seeing Qin Yining approaching the red horse, Lu Heng said nervously, If you can't do it, just admit defeat. Where there's life, there's hope. There's no need to hurt yourself because of a moment of anger. Lu Heng's handsome and noble face was filled with genuine worry. He had been watching for a long time, but as captives, they had to listen to someone else no matter what. The people around him had all died, so there was nothing he could do about this situation. Qin Yining was the woman he liked, and they were both from Daju. At this time, he couldn't help but remind her. Qin Yining turned around and nodded at Lu Heng with a smile, but she didn't agree in her heart. Admit defeat. She had never admitted defeat since she was born. When she was young in the mountains, when she encountered wild beasts, especially wolves, as long as she showed fear once, she would have been eaten until not even her bones were left. When facing wild beasts, the best way was to be even more ferocious than them. Qin Yining held the whip in one hand and the reins in the other. The red horse snorted unhappily, stomped its hooves, and shook its strong neck in dissatisfaction, resisting Qin Yining's hand that was holding the reins. However, Qin Yining's fighting spirit had been completely ignited at this time. She had long forgotten about the discomfort in her body. Her eyes were as bright as two clusters of flames. She tightly held the reins in her hands and pulled hard. Then, she nimbly pulled the saddle and mounted the horse. The red horse let out a long neigh, then immediately flipped its body and kicked its hind hooves hard, trying to throw Qin Yining off. The onlookers exclaimed. Some of the timid women and children had already covered their eyes in fear. Chapter 477. The sky was blue, the clouds were white, the grass was green, the horse was red, and the beauty was wearing a tartan robe with narrow sleeves. Her hair was flying in the wind, her skin was white as snow, her eyes were shining under her slender eyebrows, and her lips were pursed stubbornly as she trained the horse seriously. All of these formed a very impactful picture in the eyes of all the onlookers. It could no longer be described as beautiful or ugly. What was moving and shocking was the stubbornness and unyielding in her bones. Although she was too delicate compared with the wild horse, the momentum they exuded when they fought was evenly matched. Lu Heng had already been mesmerized by the scene. Sai Qin also narrowed her eyes slightly and looked amazed. Anari bit her lower lip. She didn't expect that this vixen could seduce people just by training a horse. Now, she just wanted this vixen to fall and be trampled by the wild horse until her bones and tendons were broken. But Anari's hope was doomed to fail. Qin Yining held the reins tightly, hugged the saddle, and bent down firmly on the horse's back with her legs clamped. She was not afraid of the red horse's toughness at all. She had dealt with wild horses before and had ridden the leading horse of a herd. Although the leading horse did not want to go with her when they parted, she had some love and respect for these wild and spiritual animals. Naturally, she had a way to tame them. Qin Yining was determined not to admit defeat, but the wild horse was also stubborn. When the woman and the horse were in a deadlock, the red horse saw that it could not get rid of her, so it neighed and ran wildly with her. Qin Yining was caught off guard by the horse, which made the onlookers exclaim. However, she reacted quickly and immediately straightened her posture. She simply accompanied the wild horse to run around in a circle as fast as lightning. She bent down, focused on stabilizing herself, and tried to control the horse. Her long hair flew behind her head. In the blink of an eye, she ran a lap around the wooden fence. Wherever she went, there was a gust of wind. The people around could not see her expression clearly, and she ran away in the blink of an eye. Her speed was much faster than when Anari was racing with others. After all, those men were just accompanying the Khan in the horse race. It didn't matter if they won or lost. They just wanted to make the Khan happy. But now, Qin Yining was training the horse. The most important thing was to let the horse run smoothly. Comparing the two, it went without saying which one was more realistic and whose riding skills were more exquisite. In fact, when Anari chose a wild horse for Qin Yining, hoping that she would fall to her death, Anari had already lost in horsemanship. Anari gripped the horsewhip in her hand tightly. She gritted her teeth as she looked at the person who had run several laps in front of her. Qin Yining, on the other hand, felt that the red horse had given in. Not only did it slow down, but it was also willing to listen to her commands. After riding the red horse for more than 10 laps, Chin Ening tried to stop it in front of the crowd. The red horse actually stopped with a long neigh. The crowd exclaimed in surprise. Many of the young men looked at Chin Ening with eyes full of worship and admiration. Chin Ening sat on the horse and smiled at Anari. "Khan, we can compete now." What was there to compete with? He had started by training horses, and had already displayed his superb horsemanship skills to the fullest. It was breathtaking. If they were to compete at this time, wouldn't it be embarrassing if they lost? Anari snorted and raised her chin. "I'm too lazy to compete with you." She walked towards Sai Chin. Chin Ening blinked. Her smile was very gentle, as if she was indulging an ignorant child. "All right. Then let's not compete." She nimbly dismounted from the horse and handed the reins back to the man who had led the horse to her. Who knew that the horse would snort and nudge Chin Ening's face with its big head. It even used its big face to rub against Chin Ening's neck. Its affectionate behavior made it hard to imagine that this coquettish fellow was the tyrant who had wanted to throw people to their deaths. The man was a straightforward person. He laughed when he saw this. He spoke in Daju's broken accent, "Horse, mud." Chin Ening smiled and said, "Thank you for lending it to me just now." No, horse, Western Wasteland mud, Ening, horse, belongs to mud." Daju, who was more talkative, enthusiastically helped Chin Ening translate. "Miss, Sang Da means that this horse is yours. You tamed it, and it likes you, so the horse should belong to you." Chin Ening hurriedly said, "You can't do that. This horse was originally lent to me." "Miss, you don't know. This horse was originally picked up by Sang Da. He tamed it for 3 months before the horse agreed to let him ride it. However, you tamed it in just a moment. We people of the grassland also pay attention to fate. Miss, you and this horse are clearly more fated." The other herdsmen around them also smiled and nodded. Their simple smiles were very sincere, as if everyone had forgotten how Anari had made things difficult for her. This was the cuteness of the common people. They were simple and kind. They would not use bad thoughts to judge others. They were also straightforward and would not go against the traditions of their tribe. Chin Ening really wanted to take it. She definitely would not stay here forever. She could not become a tool for others to restrict her father and Pang Xiao. Therefore, rather than waiting for death, it was better to take the initiative to attack. Therefore, with a horse, the success rate of escaping would be much higher. However, as a prisoner, even if she took the horse now, Anari would not be able to take it away because of his face. Later on, he would use all kinds of methods to prevent her from owning the horse. Anari was the Khan. Of course, he could not directly take away her things. Therefore, the best way was to let the horse die. It was useless for her to want a dead horse. Thinking of this, Chin Ening smiled and said, "I have been invited here by the Khan. Everything will be according to the Khan's arrangements. Moreover, I do not have any capable people by my side. If the Khan agrees to help take care of this horse, I will accept your kindness." After saying this, she turned to look at Anari. Anari almost spat on her face. Chin Ening was shamelessly checkmating her. If she agreed, wouldn't she be responsible for the horse's life and death? Why would she help Chin Ening take care of the horse? Anari sneered and said, "You are just a prisoner. What qualifications do you have to make such a request?" Her words caused the entire crowd to fall silent. Chin Ening faintly smiled and nodded, "The Khan is right. I am very touched that the Khan is willing to lower himself to race horses with a prisoner like me." After saying this, Chin Ening walked back to her tent. She only left the crowd to see her back. Anari looked at her back and clenched her teeth so hard that they almost bled. When she turned her head, she saw that Sai Chin was also staring at Chin Ening's back. That was the deep gaze of a man looking at a woman with a desire to plunder. It made Anari's heart skip a beat. Sure enough, her worries were not unfounded. She was a vixen. Anari clenched her fists so tightly that her knuckles cracked. Chapter 478. As soon as Qin Yining returned to the tent, she collapsed onto the couch in exhaustion. She closed her eyes and rested for a while. Then she got up and took a hair tie to tie her long hair into a loose bundle. She then lay down to rest. The maid arranged for her saw that she had fallen asleep, so she didn't disturb her and quietly left. Who knew that as soon as she lifted the curtain of the tent, she would see Qin standing at the door with his hands behind his back. She didn't know when he had arrived. When the maid saw that it was the prince consort, she was stunned for a moment before bowing in greeting. Just as she was about to open her mouth to greet him, Qin made a shushing gesture and waved his hand, indicating for her to leave. When the maid saw this, her heart skipped a beat. She thought about how the Khan had made things difficult for the person in the room today and then observed the prince consort's expression. She felt that she had discovered something incredible. This person was so beautiful that even she couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. She had to carefully protect her, so how could she be seen in a man's eyes? If the prince consort really had any thoughts, she might be the first to lose her little life. The maid lowered her head and shrunk her shoulders as she left. As she walked, she wondered if she should tell the Khan about this. She blinked and rejected this idea. Who didn't know that the Khan was infatuated with the prince consort? The Khan also wanted to be strong. If the prince consort took a fancy to another woman and the maid found out, he might immediately kill her. Even if the Khan didn't kill her, the prince consort wouldn't let her off if he found out that she had told on him. Right now, she could only pray that the Khan didn't know about this. If this matter was exposed and the Khan asked her, it would be best to find a good excuse. When the maid thought of this, she almost cried. In the tent, Qin slowly walked over to Qin Yining's bed. He lowered his head to look at her sleeping face and didn't move for a long time. This wasn't the first time he had been uncontrollably attracted to her. Qin had always been a person with great self-control. He always knew what he wanted and how to get what he wanted. But now that he saw Qin Yining, he suddenly had a strong desire to obtain this woman. It wasn't that he hadn't seen beautiful women before, but it was his first time seeing a woman as beautiful as her. She was different from all the other women in Tayton. She was like a spring, soft and firm. Her every movement was graceful, and her every frown and smile were charming. Such a woman, even if she did nothing but stay by his side, just looking at her would make him feel good. Why did this person appear so late? It seemed that Tian Jizhi was right. His life had been wasted since he was born. Everything he wanted would not be placed right in front of him. He would have to work hard to obtain them. Qin pursed his lips and sat on the edge of the bed. He knew that Qin Yining was very sensitive, so he chose to come when Qin Yining was tired. He also restrained his aura and reduced his presence so that he wouldn't stare at her all the time. Qin looked at her delicate face and felt a strong urge to touch her. He reached out and gently touched her face with his right index and middle finger. Qin Yining seemed to feel something and suddenly opened her eyes. Seeing the hand in front of her, she hurriedly slapped his hand away. With a crisp slap, Qin frowned and retracted his hand. Qin Yining jumped up. Although her vision turned dark, she didn't show it on her face. Her sharp eyes stared fiercely at Qin. She didn't sleep well and was in the enemy's camp. No matter how tired she was, she had to force herself to stay awake. If it weren't for the fact that she had wasted so much energy training the horse, she wouldn't have waited for Qin to reach out to touch her. Qin slowly stood up and looked straight into her guarded eyes. He rubbed his fingers and slowly walked forward. I suddenly have a very good suggestion. None of your suggestions are good to me. Qin Yining looked at him coldly. I advise you, Prince Consort, to cherish your current life. Although your Khan is not a very intelligent woman, she is a woman who treats you with sincerity. If you let her down, aren't you afraid of retribution? Retribution? Qin seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. Yes, you're right. Look at your man. He's killed countless people, and now his retribution is that his woman has fallen into my hand. Qin's voice suddenly rose. His low and angry voice made people's hearts tremble. Qin Yining's heart couldn't help but skip a beat, but she wasn't afraid at all. She coldly looked back at him. In the dimly lit tent, her entire body was half hidden in the shadows. Light surrounded her, illuminating her messy hair with a faint golden glow. Her eyes were especially bright, reminding Sai-Chin of packs of wolves on the grasslands. He couldn't help but stare at her in a daze. He reached out and muttered, "Woman, with such looks, why do you have such eyes? What are you doing?" An angry roar came from the front door, interrupting Sai-Chin's muttering. Anna Ri angrily strode over and pulled on Si-Chin's collar, causing him to take 2 steps back. She then fiercely flung his hand. "Didn't you say that you had something important to do? Your important matter is to come to this vixen's tent." Sai-Chin looked at Anari's flushed face and her eyes that were burning with anger. It took a lot of effort for him to suppress the disappointment in his heart. "Khan, you've misunderstood." "Misunderstood? You're a man and a woman alone in a tent, and you're not even willing to have anyone by your side. This vixen is also like this. If you say you're not moved at all, who would believe you?" Chapter 479. Thanks to the commotion caused by Anari, Qin Yining finally had a day of peace. Perhaps Sai-Chin was being watched so tightly that he didn't have a chance to get close to her. This allowed her to relax her tense nerves. The next morning, before the sun had even risen and Qin Yining had yet to get up, the tent's curtains were lifted. The autumn wind in the wee hours mercilessly entered the tent. Qin Yining quivered and opened her eyes. She sat up and looked at the door cautiously. It was a middle-aged woman with a stocky figure. She wore an indigo robe with narrow sleeves and a black waistcoat. Her hair was neatly tied up behind her head. When she saw Qin Yining, her face was filled with obvious disdain. She mocked her in Daju's dialect. "It seems like you're sleeping well. The Khan ordered me to watch over you from today onwards. The Khan and the prince consort have already gotten up and are preparing to depart. You're a prisoner, yet you're still sleeping. Get up and work." Qin Yining immediately understood. It must be that Anari couldn't bear to see her living so comfortably and had arranged for an old memar to torture her. As for the maidservants who used to carefully serve her with sparkling eyes, she probably wouldn't have them anymore. Qin Yining didn't say anything. She got up and tidied herself up. She washed her face with cold water and casually wiped her hair. She combed her hair into a simple bun and put on the red agate hat. She was all alone and didn't have any luggage. She only had some medicine that she needed to take. She organized it into a small bundle. "Let's go." Qin Yining finished her preparations. She turned around and stepped on the old memar's foot and left. The old memar didn't expect Qin Yining to be so skilled in taking care of her. She didn't haggle or drag her feet. She was completely different from the foxy woman who dared to seduce the prince consort in order to live a good life. She couldn't keep up with her train of thought, but she still remembered the Khan's orders. She strode forward and pushed Qin Yining from behind. "Hurry up and go. Don't dawdle. Who do you think you are? You're just a captive. How dare you be so arrogant in front of the Khan?" Qin Yining staggered and almost fell to the ground. After she steadied herself, she turned around angrily and raised her hand to slap the nanny. "Who do you think you are? How dare you behave atrociously in front of this king's consort?" The old mammy spun in a circle and fell to the ground dizzily. She covered her face in disbelief and looked up at her. You dare to hit me. You're the slave, and I'm the master. You offended me, so why can't I beat you? I am a guest invited by your prince consort. You, a servant, dare to be so impudent. Could it be that there is no need to discuss the matter between your Tatan and Daju? Qin Yining's voice was not loud or fast, but it was very intimidating. Qin Yining heard this and felt a wave of worry in her heart. She was now certain that there was something wrong between Sai-Chin and Anari. Anari's fearless appearance showed that she really didn't care about fighting a war. In fact, she seemed to want to fight a war. As for Daju, Pang Xiao's situation was already very awkward. If anything happened to her, with Pang Xiao's personality, She would definitely lead the army to avenge her. At that time, not to mention whether your majesty would be willing to relinquish military power, even the war itself would cause great suffering to the people. Qin Yining's mind was racing, but she didn't back down at all. The Khan has many people and a loud voice. I won't compete with you on this. Didn't you say that you wanted to return to the capital? Then I'll go to the carriage first. Qin Yining nodded and walked straight to a handcart. Lu Heng had already been placed in the carriage. When he saw Qin Yining approaching, he smiled and moved inwards to make room for her. Lu Heng whispered, "Don't provoke them, lest they suffer physical pain. I think they kidnapped the two of us for more than just ransom." "You can tell too?" Qin Yining also whispered. The two of them had a tacit understanding. It seemed that with Lu Heng's intelligence, he had already grasped some of the situation. Anari saw that Qin Yining had hooked up with Lu Heng as soon as she got on the carriage, and she was even more suspicious of her character. With a sullen face, she ordered them to set off. They weren't allowed to rest along the way. After spending an entire day, they finally entered the gates of the Taytan capital, Dardu. After dark, you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.